But yeah, planted tanks just cost as much money as like some marine tanks. You can easily spend equally as much money. I mean, like, especially if you go down the high-tech route of like CO2, good lighting and everything like that. And so there's two different types of tanks you get: is low energy and high energy. Or some people call it high-tech, but it's really high energy is a better term for it. So all it means is that essentially you've got CO2 and more prominently powerful lighting, or lighting that's suited better for plants. And the reason being is all plants, whether it's in your garden or in the water, they all absorb CO2. Obviously, we breathe out CO2, as well as a lot of animals and factories and everything. So plants take it in, and it does make them grow a lot quicker, as well as look a lot healthier. You generally find that some plants you might have in a low-tech tank might appear just green, and they're quite slow growing. So you have to be really careful in terms of like algae management and things like that. Whereas CO2, because the plants grow a lot quicker, it's a little bit easier to manage algae, and you can fill out a plant tank a lot quicker. So if we're doing a tank like this, for instance, you could put very few plants in there and use CO2 and just do regular water changes. And it does to a certain degree. So if you obviously turn it on too high and you put too much CO2 in, yes, you can risk the risk of gassing your fish out. It's the reason we have drop checkers. So it'll tell you exactly what to put it in. It takes a bit of playing around, but it's better to start with less CO2 and get up to the point where you'll know where to put it. And then once you've got it all set up, after a few months, you'll know exactly where to turn it to and put it on.
You just put some in every now and again, that's all you do?
It'll do it every day. So the easiest way is if you have a solenoid, which is basically a magnetic valve, and you plug that into a plug timer, put that in, and I usually do it about 2-3 hours before the lights come on, and then it'll get enough CO2 going up into the tank before the lights come on. That way the plants will photosynthesize and they'll grow a lot quicker. And then you want it same amount of time before the lights go off, about 2 hours before, and it'll thrive. But it's a lot better. I mean, I'd say if you've never gone that way, best thing to do. You'll never look back. If you look at your low-tech tanks compared to high-tech, it's a lot better.
I like plants, but they get on my nerves because you have to trim when you get to all of them. Like we've got these.
It's the case? Yeah. Like a Java fern, is it? No?
No, we had Java fern. That's no longer in our tank.
No, Java fern, Java moss.
Java moss, yeah.
Moss is a nightmare,
It goes crazy.
It just grew, just filled the tank.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's got long stems.
Looks like
Like an umbrella.
an umbrella.
Like an umbrella.
Growing.
Just keep coming out.
It close up when you turn the lights off. And then
It'll be Limnophilia heterophilia,
It's
if I had to have a guess. Quite feathery looking.
yeah.
Yeah. Like they look like
Quite fluffy.
Yeah.
almost like an umbrella.
So in aquascaping, we know it as a weed, just because of how quickly it grows. It is just one of those plants. You don't tend to see many people using it, just because of how quickly it grows. And
I like the look of it, and the fish like it. They like
Yeah.
swimming around it, but every week you have to trim it.
trim, yeah.
It's easy to trim, you just pinch it, but
Yeah.
it does grow a lot.
That thing's got transplanted to every tank.
Yeah,
And it filled every tank.
It will do, yeah. It's a keep going.
taking cuttings and putting it in all the time.
Yeah. It's a keep on going. It is a nice plant, but it just grows so quickly. And it can if you've got really powerful lighting, it'll get to a point where the nodes between the leaves get really long and it starts looking a bit leggy. So you do have to keep trimming it quite regularly.
The lights in ours are quite bright. We've got 60 litre ones have got these big LED tubes that are really big.
Yeah.
The dual ones, and then the others are just the little better tanks. The best one. That's got day and night light.
Yeah.
That which is like a blue one at night. It's not growing any algae.
That's the best way. So are your tanks all lidded, or have you got open top? All lidded. Okay.
No, all in the lid.
Yeah. No,
We've got one of them ones, 45 litre, and that one I have to leave the lid up so it's
Yeah,
all that all the time.
Condensation gets on lid, it drips onto the
yeah.
floor,
So you have to leave the lid up. Yeah.
Design ever for a lid.
That's fair. Like with open top tanks, you do lose a bit in condensation. Like especially in the summer, it evaporates like no tomorrow. But it is a quite a nice aspect is that you can have like hardscape and things poking out the surface of the water. You don't like it? No.
You couldn't put shrimp in there, could you? Because the shrimp would fly out.
No. You can put shrimp in.
You can.
Don't get me wrong. You've always got that risk that something will jump out.
Yeah.
It's always the risk for open top tanks, but say you can have plants growing out the top of the water, you can have hardscape, but it's each their own. If you're not a fan, you're not a fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Contained.
Yeah, nothing wrong. I mean, also like lidded tanks have their advantage. You know, you don't get as much condensation. You know, you're not going to have anything dropping into the water, anything like that, and yeah, anything like that. You know, pets drinking out of it and things like that. Yeah, there's always that risk. Kids' fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, you've always got that risk with it. But yeah, obviously this is the tank we're going to scape today. So this is the fluval shaker, 345 litres. It's a nice sized tank. I think it's roughly 3 foot by about 1.5 feet. I think it is roughly. Or it says it here. I should probably read it, but yeah. So it's 108 centimetres by 58. So yeah, it's just under 2 foot wide. And then front to top, we're looking at 130 centimetres. It's quite a nice little tank to go for. Comes with the Fluval 407, nice decent size external filter. So the best thing with fluval filters is it's got like all your sponges in one little tray, and then at one side you've got all these like sort of trays that clip together. Now they come with standard, I think it's carbon and phosphate remover, but you can have anything you want in it. If you want to take it out and put biomedia in, you can do. That's what personally I would do, just because biomedia is so much more effective producing the bacteria that obviously helps with the nitrogen cycle, so it's a lot better for it. But you've got that customizability with those filters, which is great. And obviously Fluval's a really reputable brand anyway, easy to get hold of and easy to find parts for. Best thing with this tank compared to the 252 litres, you get 2 lights for this one, which is 2 Fluval skies. I think that's 7,500 Kelvin for these ones, which is a decent plant growing light. And because you get 2, you can have them one come on at one time and one come on at the other. If you want to have like extra high powered lights just for a short period of time, you can have it that way as well. Generally I recommend about 6 to 8 hours of daylight with your lights, but it's up to you. Go for what your plants need. If they need more, you go have more. If they need less, put less. But yeah, we'll start with the hardscape. So obviously, as I said to you previously, this is what we're going to be using. So this is grey mountain rock. Can sometimes be called Syrio stone, but it's a really nice one. As you see, it's got really nice what we call a stratum. So stratum is like, if you see the lines in the rock, it's the way it sort of travels. Now the best way with stratum is you don't want, say, the lines to be going this way and then to have a rock next to it where they're going the opposite way, because it just won't flow properly, and you'll always think when you see it, it'll look a bit weird. But hardscape is what we know as the skeleton of your aquascape. It's what's going to make your aquarium look really the best in terms of without the plants. So you can just have a hardscape only tank, but it's the backbone. And if you have a really poor hardscape, your planted tanks will just look terrible. It's how they always will look. But if you have a really good hardscape in there, you've got that skeleton to build upon. And a lot of people tend to, if you go on a tank, they'll go very flat and it looks very one-dimensional and you're not getting that depth. You've got all this tank space to use. Try with height. So if you build your way up and slope it backwards towards the back of the tank, so all your substrate should go towards the back. You don't want it towards the front or just a flat level, because it will just look very boxed in and it'll look terrible. Whereas if you bank it to the back, it'll get that depth and it'll actually make the tank look bigger. For instance, the tank that I've got is a 70 litre. I did a scape for my previous one, but you might have seen it at the Asian Peninsula. It's got so much rock in it and wood that I took a picture of it and people were saying that it's, what size tank is it? And they wouldn't believe it, it's a 70 litre, just because it looks so much bigger than it actually is. But if you bank it up to the back, it'll look bigger. And then the wood we're going to use is this stuff here. So this is called Corbo root. It's quite light wood, but as you can see, you've got really nice big structural holes inside and quite large pieces and relatively cheap. So this piece is only £30 for quite a large piece of wood, which isn't too bad at all. So the only thing we might find with the wood, it might float, which is the only downside. So for a few weeks, you can either, there's a few methods you can do. The one I'm going to do is just put some heavy rocks on top. That way it'll hold them down, but it won't allow them to float up. after a couple of weeks, all you've got to do is just lift the rock gently. If you feel the wood coming up, just put it back down. Trial and error until it's fully sunk. Shouldn't take too long in a tropical tank because it's a bit warmer water, it does tend to sink a little bit better. You can also, if you want to, and you've got a bit more time on your hands, you can silicone it in. That will, after 24 hours, it will hold it in. So if you've got that time to wait and you're setting the new tank up, I'd definitely say that would be the better way to go, just because you've got no worries that your wood's going to float, and you can also make sure that it's not going to fall over. So if you're going quite high, you've always got that risk something might drop off and hit your glass, and then, oh no, broken tank, everything like that. Some people do tend to boil it. Now, the only thing I'll say about boiling wood is it's good and it will make it sink because it'll permeate it in it quicker. However, if you're not a fan of tannings, it releases it quicker. And that's when a lot of people tend to go off bogwood because they'll think, oh, my tank's just gone looking like tea. So it's not a good thing to go then. But if you just leave it to its own devices, you'll always get a bit of tannings. Now, there's a few ways you can remove it. Carbon's the main one, but you can also, if you just do regular maintenance, it shouldn't bother you anyway. It'll never go dark tea colour. It'll just stay a nice, pretty much forever. It's one of those things. Certain woods you'll find will do it a little bit more. So the softer woods, which that definitely is, softer woods will leak it quicker. If you go for something a bit more like this, which is Redmore root, it's a slightly harder wood. So it'll tend to float a bit easier because it's quite hard, but it won't leak tannings as quickly. So if you prefer less tannings in the water, I'd go for this. And if you just float it in a bucket or something like that, or just, as I say, if you can do the time, silicone it in, and that'll hold it down. The only thing you might find with this kind of wood is it does have a bit of sap inside it, and it won't affect the fish or anything like that, but when you put it in water, after a couple of days, you might notice a white furry substance growing all over it. Won't harm the fish whatsoever, and usually you can either scrub it off or the fish will generally just peck on it and eat it up anyway, so you don't have to worry about that, but it sometimes can frighten people a little bit. And then as a planting substrate, we're going to use this, which is fluval stratum. So I've never used this one personally. This is generally just an aqua soil. It's quite budget friendly compared to a lot of the more higher brands like ADA and JBL. They tend to be a bit more of a premium price. However, I think it's worth the money to pay for it. But if you're just going for like a low-tech budget tank, you've got the fluval stratum. Awase is quite a reputable brand that's cheap as well. They've got quite a nice soil that they've just brought out as well, and that comes in two colours. So you've got the dark brown, or they have the beige one in Awase as well. So if you're doing something a bit lighter, you've got that colour option available. But yeah, we'll get to work with the hardscape. So the main thing that we're going to do is just basically snip open the bags, and I'm going to just put a little layer of soil in the bottom just so the rocks are sitting on it, and then I'll show you something that we're going to do in a little bit. And I think somebody has nicked my scissors, but actually while I'm saying that, I've got my scissors here and sipping me. Yeah. There we go. There we go. So, oops, you don't have to worry about these little bits. So we can literally just brush them back and we'll not see them. Or they're going to get buried by the sand anyway if any bits are left. But we'll just push them back. Because the whole plan that we're going to be doing is we're going to have it quite open towards the filter valves. So although the downside with this design is they're always going to be on show, if you need to maintain them, it's going to make it a little bit easier. So I'd always recommend just keep them a little bit open, just so you can maintain it. Obviously, yeah, you're going to be looking at them, but we can put plants in the way. So that's the main thing we've got to do with that. But yeah. So what we're going to do now is I've got this lovely choice of hardscape on the bottom. As you can see, big bits of mountain stone. They've got some really nice stratum in it, and the plan that we're going to do is we're going to make sort of a half sort of semicircle just going this way, so we're going to have an open foreground that goes pretty much all the way to here, which looks pretty decent, and then we're going to put like a nice decorative sand layer. That way if you want to have any cories or anything like that, or just feed your fish, you can feed them straight at the front and they'll have a nice area to go from. But we'll just have a play around, see where we're going. Obviously if you've got any questions, just feel free to shout them out.
Do you ever bulk it out with a lot of sand up bottom? Not so you can see it?
Bulk it out with a lot of sand. The reason that...
Some plants prefer sand to substrate.
As I say, I mean, they all need something to grow on. So if you're doing sand, I'd always put like a nutrient layer underneath it, because plants can't grow in sand. They need something to feed off of. And
more open structure than sand.
yeah,
Some of the substrate I used before is compacted down so much that it is solid.
yeah.
There's a bit of sand underneath and sometimes it breaks.
It can do it that way. You'll find with the fluval stratum and anything like this planted substrate is, it does start to compact over the time, but because it's the way it's designed to be in like little pellets, it's quite open and it allows the water flow to go underneath. And so if you don't want it to compact too much, you're going quite deep at the back, you can always use like a bit of crushed lava rock on the bottom, or even gravel, something like that. Yeah, just to basically have something a bit deeper up, and obviously it's cheaper for you to use something to bulk it up at the back if you're not going to be planting up into it. So the roots will go down into the substrate anyway, and they'll feed off of the planting substrate, but you'll not have anything like too bad in terms of water effect.
Trying to get about 2 or 3 inch block substrate around
Yeah.
put a lot of wet sand in the middle in the mount, and then build
Yeah.
around it. You couldn't see it at all, they were in there, but it looked like I had tons of substrate,
Yeah.
but they weren't as much as it looked.
The trouble you find with sand is, because it's more compact than gravel, it can get a lot of waste trapped under it over time, and it starts creating little gas pockets. And what that'll happen is, if anything disturbs that, it can release into the water, and your tank can go from being brilliantly in terms of water quality to nothing. So you kind of want your sand to be quite thin, just so that if you've got fish turning it over.
They got a bit bigger and did start smashing it about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know exactly what
Yeah. So if you're doing that, I'd always just go for like gravel on the bottom or something like that. The JBL lava rock's pretty decent, because lava rock, not only that, it allows the good bacteria to grow onto it, but it allows the water to pass underneath it as well, which doesn't get those gas pockets then. But yeah, it's a good question. But yeah, I'd always probably say go as thin as you possibly can. That way you'll not risk your fish. So where's everyone from? Sheffield, yeah? You're pretty local?
Absolutely.
Oh, nice. Whereabouts in Sheffield?
South End forward.
All right, okay, lovely. Lovely stuff. You certainly can, sir.
I've got a tank at home and got rolling pipes, and they're actually near the front. I noticed they're near the back. A better place to position lily pipes, could have the flow here and the return there, or
So, personally, I prefer them next to each other. It doesn't matter necessarily whether they're at the front or the back, but as long as the lily pipes are together,
yeah.
that way you've got your exit, your inlet pipe to your filter is going to be there, and so it's going to push the water around and drag everything back. That way you're getting really good circulation that way. If you're worried about circulation and you're wanting just that little bit more power, you could always add like a surface skimmer. You can just buy them on their own, and have that like say just a little bit further around, so you're getting a bit more surface movement, as well as obviously it's taking that protein scum off the top of the water as well. Either that, an extra external on the other side of the tank. So if you've got one here, you could always have the lily pipes on here with a separate external. That way you've got 2 lots of filtration going around. There's no harm in doing that. Obviously you just have to make sure that certain species of fish don't like too much flow, whereas many of them quite happily do it. So it's just personal preference really. But yeah, it doesn't really matter if the lily pipes are at the back or the front, whichever happens. I'd definitely say if you're using like glass ones, really doesn't matter as long as you keep them clean. So do you have plastic ones, glass or steel?
I've got both.
You got both? Okay.
Yeah, I've got both. I've got CO2 as well, so injection,
Yeah, yeah.
some drain at the moment,
So with your CO2, do you have, is it say inline or is it
I've got an inline one.
inline? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. I'm more into the growing the plants. I've got a few fish, but I just try to come to the aquarium.
Oh, he's a man after my own heart. I prefer that. I prefer looking plants to fish as such. It's a new game changer, I always find.
I had a fish tank 20 years ago, and I went off it, you know what I mean, because I was getting algae every day and what have you, and then I had a look again a couple of years ago, and it's just totally changed.
Yeah.
And we didn't have this stuff then, you know,
Yeah.
and CO2 and stuff like that, you know, so I got back into it.
It's CO2 is definitely it's one of those game changers, but once you've used it, as I was telling the ladies and gentlemen here, you'll never go back. It's just such a game changer in terms of growing plants.
Just a fire extinguisher, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Get it off Amazon, about £12 and it'll last me a good 6 months.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's I ended up getting actually one of the proper CO2 kits off a friend. It was empty and he didn't use it, but I filled it up. It's still going. It's been going about 9 months now. Also, when I got a small tank, but bigger the tank.
Mine's all around with litres, you know. It's,
Yeah,
I know you.
definitely.
all right, if you've got a big massive house.
It is. It is.
And this is the mad.
Yeah.
Realistic as well.
I keep getting told off for buying more tanks rather than sticking with one.
This is it, I'm thinking myself that I'll have to drop that one shot.
Hoping I'll win raffle. Scott said if I got it for free.
Very true. It's very true. It's, have you all entered the raffle then?
Yeah.
Yeah? Or is it going to be some...
Would there be any point washing that rock before you put it in, or will it? Have you just done it second?
You can do if you want to. It's personal preference, really. The main thing is with like washing the rocks is you will get a bit of dust off it. I'd say Dragon Rock's definitely one of those you want to give it a good scrub. So that can have a lot of clay on it. Once it hits water, it all runs on top of your substrate and it just looks like a right mess. Not harm the fish in any way, but it'll certainly look very discoloured. Is 100% one of those things, but try not to break the glass. but yeah, it's one of those. I mean, with this, yeah, you're going to get a little bit of dust, but the majority of it will probably just float to the surface anyway. And with any planted tank, I'd always recommend, especially if you're using the planted substrate, you want to be doing about a 50% water change every day for the first week. So you're going to pull it out regardless. Second week, you're going to be doing it every other day, then every third day, twice a week, then once a week. So it's a bit of a process to get it all set up, but that way you'll run the risk of some planted substrates create a hell of a lot of ammonia because it is an organic matter in its own right. So your filter bacteria will always try and combat it.
Bit of feeding.
Yeah, it's great for food, but yeah, it can sometimes cause a bit of algae issues. So if you do those initial water changes to start off with, you should be fine. After that, majority of it will settle down and you shouldn't have any algae issues whatsoever. But if you do, all you've got to do is just ramp it back up. So if you end up with algae after the first, like you're just doing 1 water change a week, bring it back to 2 water changes. If it's still prolific, go back up to 3 water changes a week and then see how you do them. But it should settle down eventually. It all just depends what brand you're using and if you're doing a high energy or a low energy setup. Use that rock. So a high energy setup will probably use the nutrients a lot quicker. Just depends on the lighting, but it'll definitely help a lot if you're using CO2. A low tech setup, you're probably not going to need as much planting substrate as you necessarily would in a high-tech setup, but you'll certainly have to use a lot more liquid fertilisers in the long run. There's either that, go plant it as if you were doing a high-tech and have lots of planted substrate, but do more regular water changes on it. But it depends how big your tank is. I mean, if it's a little nano tank, 30 litres, something like that, it's a 10-20 minute job.
I'm working away Monday to Friday, and I had a look on YouTube, right? Because I've got soil,
Yep.
I left it to run for about 3 weeks with a light on, and all the ammonia kind of started to filter, and I emptied it, and then I planted it, and it seemed to do it every day.
Yeah.
So working
You
away
can certainly do it that way if you haven't got the time to do it. Definitely, obviously, like limit your lighting periods. That'll certainly help.
That soil kickstarted with the ammonia. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it will do. Yeah, because like I say, it's its own it's an organic matter.
Hardscape and everything. I just did put plants in, and then afterwards I put plants in after about 3 weeks. And
Yeah,
I do 50% water change every week anyway. You know. But I found that quite good. It's different ways.
it definitely is a challenge. You'll find with your water changes.
I don't mind it actually. I find it quite.
I do therapeutic. Yeah, some people with water changes, they get really put off by water changes with keeping fish, and I just think if that's the case, you've either got two things: it's the wrong hobby, or you've got too big of a tank. And that's the thing. Obviously, when you're choosing a size of tank, is it's great to have something this big, but if you ain't got the time to manage it, it's never going to be happy for you, and it'll always be full of algae, and you'll just end up either quitting the hobby, which we want more people to join the hobby really than anything, but go for something smaller.
About 2 hours a week for us for our tanks.
Yeah.
And then obviously a little bit in between.
Yeah, that's the best way. If it only takes you a couple of hours a week, then you're fine, aren't you? I'll tell you what I do need. Don't know if I'll be able to reach it. You can ask a volunteer. Just around the corner here, there's a bag of polyfill. Will you be able to grab that one?
Like a what?
It's like polyfloss. Just go for the small superfish one. Middle shelf. That we're out. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to do a trick now, which will help you. As you can see, there's a few beads that I've forgot to get away of the planting substrate. So what we do with this is, obviously it doesn't affect the water quality, but it'll help in terms of it'll keep that soil towards the back, so you'll not get that much come through to your planting substrate. Don't get me wrong, if you put shrimp in your tank, you'll always get a little bit on the sand, so they just love to grab hold of it and play around with it, but it's one of those things, you'll not end up with too bad. All you've got to do is just go around, plug all the gaps, and you'll not see it.
I've seen people glue them together with that as well.
Yeah, you can. So you can use this, or a lot of people tend to use cigarette filters. Tends to be one.
I've seen them put like super glue on it when they're sticking rocks together.
Yeah, basically because the rocks won't stick together with super glue, but they'll stick to other substances. So yeah, you can always do it that way. If you've got the time, yeah. So the reason we use super glue is if it's aquarium safe, because the second it comes into contact with water, it sets. Yeah, and it almost turns to like a plastic, whereas obviously with silicone, you've got to wait at least 24 hours before it's cured, and it's a little bit more of a faff. Obviously, if you're setting a new tank up like this, I'd say just use silicone it. It'll be a lot easier for you. But if you're wanting to you're not going to see it. It's going to be under the substrate. So they shouldn't eat it, even if they did. But it's one of those things. They might have a tug at it if you've got like dwarf cichlids or something like that. But they shouldn't be able to see any of it once it's planted. It's only here to keep the substrate behind the rocks, which is what we want more than anything, because you don't want all this sliding through and making your sand look all messy. So that's the only reason we use it. And you don't need to use that much of it. Just little balls, roll it up into a ball and just gently poke it in. You don't need to be like vigorously trying to shove it in, especially if you're doing it this way where you're not gluing the rocks down, because you'll just end up pushing the rocks out of the way. So if you just gently push it in, you should be okay. But it's just about trying to plug every single hole. Just like that. But it's one of my little tricks, that way you end up with nice clean sand. Like I say, if you put shrimp in it, they'll pull it forwards somehow. It's no matter what you do. But as I say, it doesn't affect the water because we use it as filter media, so it'll not affect the water whatsoever. Oops. I think we're nearly there. Bit of a gap under there. There we go. So that should hopefully be plugged up to its highest. So now what we can do, we can add the rest of the planted substrate. I'll put them there so I don't knock everything over. Oops. There we go. Yes, as you say, we're using quite a lot of planting substrate. It's not going to be cheap to do a tank this big, but definitely worthwhile. And just make sure all of it's filled out. So really with your planting substrate, I'd say minimum depth you kind of want it is about 5 centimetres. Main reason being is when you're pushing your plants in, you don't want them to obviously come back up, so you need to go in further enough that it'll pinch it, and then when you release your tweezers, it's not going to just float out, which really anything under that you're going to struggle. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can get away if you're using like the tropical powder substrate and just having that under like sand might pinch it a little bit easier with sand, but you're definitely going to want something under it as a bit of nutrients, because I've seen so many people try and grow plants and you have relative success but not huge amounts with a lot of plants, is that you'll try and use just gravel or sand and there's no nutrients in there. It's basically relying on not cleaning your tank out and having your fish waste decompose down there. You can get your liquid fertilizer, and that'll definitely help if you just got gravel, but I've seen so many people do it where they just got gravel and don't do anything, and they wonder why they haven't got good plant growth. It is, and the trouble with plant growth is plants are brilliant for water quality when they're growing, but if they're not growing, they can cause a world of hurt, and not only to your bank balance but to your tank as well. as with everything these days, everything's going up in price, so there we go. Like you see, we've just got that substrate banked up to the back as well, so that way it'll help, let's say, create that depth that something's a lot larger that way than it will be for working up. Then we're going to get our wood in. So as I said to you a couple before, wood we're going to use is this, just carbo root, which is a really nice piece of wood. It's a little bit light, so you might want to either silicone it or weigh it down, but it's a really nice piece to use. And then our plan is we're going to use this all the way along, but sort of we're going to probably end up about halfway up the tank, if 3/4 of the way up the tank, just by using the wood, and that'll create even more depth in terms of going up, which will allow the tank to look even bigger than it actually is. But we'll start with the big pieces. So let's try and rest you there. And it's quite a nice big flat piece. And the best thing is all these gaps that you sort of see between the woods, we can actually plant plants in there. There's a few plants that like quite low lighting anyway, and they'll grow quite happily in those areas. Or even if they're just suspended, you can always shove Anubias in there, Java fern, anything like that, and that'll grow out and fill those gaps up. So it's interesting with like plants you have, what we call like epiphyte plants. They're plants that prefer to grow onto things rather than in the substrate. So if we use those, you can actually get quite a mature looking tank very quickly. Yeah. Bit of fishing line. You can even super glue them on. I definitely say if you can, wedge it in naturally. Obviously it's sort of better on your bank balance if you can just wedge it in, but if you can't, a bit of super glue to hold it straight away. Downside is once you rip it off, or if you rescape him, you've got that little bit of super glue dots already on. It is a bit of a bugger to get off, but a bit of chisel or something like that. Yeah. It is a lot of effort. It's either like just replant it on the same spot, then you don't have to worry then. But yeah, we're getting there. Oh, quite nice. Let's start that up.
Figure out how much water that displaces, you know, for treating it or doing anything like that? Whatever 100 litre tank.
Yeah, I mean,
You put a lot of stone in, you put a lot of wood in, changing how much water's actually in there.
to be honest with you, it's not going to displace that much.
And if say you're treating a specific thing, and you have to put a certain amount in 200 litres,
Yeah.
but it's not 200 litres in there anymore, it's that big, it's going to be what?
The only thing, it's not 100% science, but the best way I'd probably say to do it is if you can weigh everything before you put it in. So if you're putting like 50 kilogram of rock, depending on what rock it is, it will depend, but it's most likely going to displace that much water anyway. So if you do it on that basis, treating wise, yeah, if you treat just slightly over, it's not going to hurt your fish. Obviously a lot over wood, but that's the best way I'd probably say to do it. Just weigh your rock and your wood, whatever it weighs, that's roughly how much it's probably going to displace. Yeah, it'll probably not hurt, if anything. And if you've got good filtration and everything like that, it'll certainly help with the oxygen. If you do put a bit too much in, you can always put a surface skimmer in, like I said before, or a wave maker or something like that, just to put a bit extra. Even an air stone will certainly help as well. But yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really have an exact answer for that. Yeah.
On a bigger scale.
Don't get me wrong, yeah.
Massive tank and you put in loads and loads of rocks here.
It'll certainly displace it.
1,000 litres.
I mean, probably the best exact science I probably would say other than weighing it, is just try and work out how much you're putting in it. So if you do it with buckets, obviously most buckets are about 10-15 litres, so it's going to be a lot of buckets, but you can certainly measure it. Yeah. Yeah. But another good point with the wood is, with most wood you'll find when you're buying it, it's got quite a flat edge, you notice on the side. You ideally don't want to be looking at that. Obviously with this, I'm angling it towards the back. There's always going to be a little bit, if you're visual in it from this side, that you're going to end up seeing it. It's the only trouble, but we can disguise it. It's if you got like a piece like, say with the Redmore root, because they definitely do clip that off. If it's just flat, stick a plant on it. That's the best way. It'll disguise it in no time.
Yeah, those are fishy still, so we don't touch them. Your hands might have
There we go. I think we are running out of wood at the minute. Yeah? I hope they don't mind me using it all. Go. That looks alright to me. So next thing we're going to do the decorative substrates. So what we're going to use is the only bag of sand I can find, but it's a nice little river sand. It's quite a big grain, but it does look quite effective once it's in the tank. It stays pretty light as well, but because it's not white, the trouble you find with white sand is it is a devil to keep pristine white. It'll always go a little bit discoloured over the time, but because this is just a slightly off-white, it's more of a natural colour, it won't bother you that much. And the best thing I'd always say is get a little bit of a bigger bag than you need. Keep it in the bottom of the cupboard or anywhere you've got in the house, if you can keep it anywhere. If you siphon it a bit out, you'll always might lose a little bit, but if it's a bit dirty, just take it out. Because it's at the front, we could effectively take all that out and replace it with fresh stuff whilst the tank's full of water. It'll not do anything at all. But, So I have got a little tub, because we're not going to need it all. It definitely saves your back picking it up. But all we need to do is then just sprinkle it in. Let's see. Depends on the scape. I definitely say if you've got a plan, it will help in terms of getting stuff, but you'll never really get it to the exact point.
Base mine around one thing, so I'll get
Yeah.
one rock or one.
Yeah. That's the best way. If you've got like a rock that you can just think that's the one I want to have as a feature rock, yeah, try and incorporate that. It's either that like a theme. So if you're having like doing a scape, like having kind of like it's like a story essentially to tell about your scape is like what you think. Yeah. Sometimes it does help if you haven't got a plan, but you've got like a good selection of rocks at home. Just start playing around with it. If you stick some stuff in and play around with it, something creatively will click, and you'll think, right, there you go, and you can go at it then.
I'll probably learn something from each little one I've done.
Yeah. The best advice I'd probably say, like in terms of hardscape and anything like that, is no matter what shop you're going into, if it has hardscape available, just buy one thing. If you can buy one rock and you've got the facilities at home to have a good storage, if it's in a garage or in a shed or you know, in your wardrobe in a box. I just got a big plastic box in the bottom of my wardrobe that I fill with rocks and wood.
I do house clearances and removals and stuff like that. So any fish tank stuff just comes
Yeah.
over me.
Best way, if you've got the facilities to do it, just store it. The more hardscape you can collectively collect, you've got the better option of choosing when you're doing your scape. I mean, like, I've got all these rocks around here. I've actually only used one box, but
Sometimes can help when you've got loads, but you know,
yeah.
it's great to have everything.
And the main thing is with hardscape as well, especially rocks. Wood, not so much, but definitely rocks. Try and use the same type, because no matter where you look in the world, really, if you look in the river, it's majority is the same rocks. You might find like pebbles and things like that surrounding the rocks will be a little bit different, but the main structure will be all the same rock. And you find that if I put like mountain rock at this side and then halfway through I decide to chuck lava rock in, it'll look really strange and odd. It won't fit whatsoever. So just try and stick with the same type. I mean, really, the same can be said for sand as well. You know, try and pick a sand that complements your scape and your hardscape, because at the end of the day, this is all part of the hardscape process. And it'll definitely help if, in the long term, if you pick something that's nice and easy to maintain, but looks nice as well.
Smart using that little jug though, a bit more control.
It's a lot more control. I know I've just tipped it all over that piece of wood there, but yeah, it's a hell of a lot more control if you use like just a small glass or a jug or anything like that. That way you're not just dumping it over the top. Because they are, yeah, I mean, there's a 20 kilogram bag, so it's definitely a lot heavy. I mean, it's not too bad necessarily if you're using like the little 2 kilograms, because you can just,
that's easy enough.
it's literally just, there you go, but
3 or 25.
yeah,
Suddenly
it's,
more complex.
I definitely say maintaining control with 20 kilograms is very hard. 10 kilogram is doable, but you've got to have the muscles to do it. So, and not only this, you make sure that you're not using too much, because you don't need a lot. It's basically just going around areas where I need to touch up and make sure.
Tube, like a big tube, plastic tube.
Yeah.
You know, while there's a bit of water and stuff. That's more we gravel.
That's the best way, yeah.
Direct
Bit of PVC tube. You can put a funnel in top if you really want to. Just tip it in, that way you can essentially top it up over time. It's really easy to do.
That's more for adding later on.
It's more for adding than like doing it initially, but that should do us perfectly. And now we're going to do, I say, you want it really fine at the front and just back it up into these corners. And then what you probably notice is it does look quite a straight edge when we're looking at it head on. You know, you're literally going from sand to your rocks, which some people do like that look, and if you do, I'll never fault you for it. But personally, I don't like that. I think it just looks too artificial. So once I've finished doing that, so what we can do is, you can always go into your box of rocks and get some smaller pieces, and just out in the foreground, just place a couple of these smaller pieces. So it just breaks that line up a little bit. But even still, obviously, it is slightly artificial because of the way I've obviously just placed those in. So, obviously I picked this bag up earlier. So, what we're then going to do is use a little bit of aquarium gravel and just sprinkle it by hand, let the rocks land wherever they want to. And by doing that, it'll create like a more natural riverscape, in the sense that obviously as the water's passing down, if you imagine that out here would be more open water, the rocks and pebbles and things that are getting brought down river, they get snagged in the gaps, and it'll make it look a lot more natural. So just open that up a little bit, and then if you just take it over the top, small little handful, and just sprinkle it on. And then you kind of want to go a little bit heavy with it, because I've done this in the past where I've not used enough, and over time you get a little bit sink into the sand. So if you go slightly heavy with it, over time it will just sink in. And it doesn't matter if any of it goes on your rocks, because it just makes it look even more natural. But you can get different, obviously, grades of rock, so you can use if you wanted to. I mean, I'm a bit limited on what they have in store at the minute, but you could use bigger pebbles if you just want a few bigger pebbles, and then have some slightly smaller pebbles and grade it up that way. And if you can do that, it'll look even more natural. It just makes it look a hell of a lot better over time, and it's a way of like making it more of a natural scape for you. A little bit more in. I think, try not to drop too much on the floor. That should do us. As I say, you don't want too much, but just that little bit that it transforms it. So you're not getting that sort of like sand then rock. It's just slowly, gradually, just gradually builds it up that way, and it'll make it look a lot more natural that way. I say you'll always lose a little bit, some of it will sink into the sand, so over time you might need to top it up, but if you're buying a small bag like that, you can just keep it in your aquarium cupboard and just keep chucking bits in if you need to. But yeah, next bit we're going to go on to is planting. So bear with me 2 seconds, I'll go and grab some plants, and I'll show you what we're going to be using. I should be able to get round. I'm sorry, I'm in your way, aren't I? There we go. I promise I'm not going to steal. I know. I'm not going to steal all the plants either.
I only want a couple of Anubias, I think.
I'm probably going to use all the Java fern there. So let's have a look. Yeah, I know they have got a great selection of plants over here at Sheffield.
Probably the best bank in here, is that that? Imagine that.
Definitely would be a nice one.
I'd make a proper river scape. You're getting a flow going.
It'd be easy enough. Do you have many planter tanks at home?
Too many of my missus there.
This way. What are your favourite types of plants?
I love Anubias. One because they're easy, but they do grow really fast and you can do a lot with it.
I do, yeah.
Because they're that easy, you can play around with them.
So, do you say you use CO2 or it's just not non-CO2?
I don't have CO2. I've used it, but I didn't notice a massive difference with the plants I had.
Okay.
To warrant doing it 24/7 all the time.
You'll definitely find with your more low light depending plants like Anubias, there isn't much noticeable in growth. However, leaf structure, 100%. So when you obviously buy them, nanas, which this possibly might be a nana here. That's has to follow. It's quite a big one, but You sometimes find a lot of nannias. Is that one actually? That's a Barteri, so it's very similar. But as you see, when you buy them, there's these massive leaves on them. And a Nano, if you put it in a CO2 setup, will look very similar to the Nano Mini. It has really, really small, tighter growth, yeah, which can look a lot nicer, but you can definitely make them.
Some of the fish I've got a minute are like koi, carp, and things like that. And what I'm doing is I'm growing them inside while they're really small.
Yeah, so you don't want to rip them up.
You get to that point where they're a bit too big and they need to go outside, and they just start ripping plants apart.
Yeah.
That's when I go, yep, that's time.
I'll use a couple of these. Let's have a look. What else have we got?
I mean, I really like the darker leaves. You know,
Lagandandra.
I do like the darker leaves. And
Tell you what, I'll
gives you
put.
that contrast to sort of.
Yeah, I'll put some of this in. So it is a nice one, and it'll go even more pinky in time. I'll put some of that in.
Yeah, I collect osters. They're not enough water plants up this. Well, we can't do that. I've probably got like 80 different species of oster on my garden.
Nice.
What are miniature ones? I mean, they're 10, 15 quid a pop.
Yeah.
Let's
have a look.
Break more beef, yeah.
It's definitely the case, yeah. See what else I could use. I might, after in a bit, I'll steal some of their.
Not too far to go. You need to do that.
It's very true. So it's only just behind me, so it's not too bad. Right. So if I move some of this wood out of the way, there we go. We've got some lovely choice in plants.
Are they keeping this tank here then? You've got it all?
Well, they're supposed to be. It depends how well they look after it, but I know that the guys here will look after it definitely well. They've just plumbed in, as you can see behind me, this white pipe here. So they've got direct water source. So, yeah. So I think they're having a bit of kinks in getting the water up. They've got to get one more tap, I believe. But yeah, after that should be a doddle. They can just drain it straight out, fill it back up from there. So shouldn't be a problem getting water to it. And I imagine. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm here most of the time. Like I come here quite regularly, so I'll definitely be able to see, and I'll tell them off if they don't look after it.
Is it the same owner then for this one and doggers?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I think it's got 4
It's 5, I believe, in total.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got Grantham, Trowell, Nottingham, Chesterfield, and here. It's because it's so close to the Nottingham one, but yeah, they're all nice stores. And the
Shrimp roots on them before you put them in?
certain plants, yeah. Yeah, it all depends on what you're using. Crypts are one of those. They can be a bit fiddly, and you get what they call crypt melt, because a lot of plants can melt, which is basically where, because they're grown in a greenhouse, a lot of them, when they put submerged, they have to adjust. Now, it's easier for some plants if the parameters are a lot different to what they're used to just melt off, and they'll basically just rot off. So all you have to do is just trim them off, suck all the waste out, do some good water changes, and it should come back. No, so it's actually more with the potted plants. So it's a good question, and a good thing to point out. So in vitro plants are actually grown in the laboratory. So although they may seem more expensive, so these ones are now, I think they're like £5.50 a pot. In vitro pots can go anywhere from like £6.99 up to about £10, depending on what you're buying, even more than that if they're rarer plants. And it seems a lot more expensive, and they get overlooked a lot of the time, but they're actually better value for money. So you'll get more plants in it than you would in a potted plant, even though they're smaller, you get a lot more plants for your money. But not only that, because they're grown in a laboratory and they're grown in like either a liquid form or a gel form, they're actually already adapted to being submerged. So you shouldn't get any melt off them. But it all depends what it is. But yeah, they're a hell of a lot better in vitro plants. And the only added benefit as well you get from them, they're pest free. So you don't get any pest snails in them, which is great. So if you like a snail-free environment,
You've got worms on one of them. Like these little like see-through worms, whatever they are.
so there could be planaria. I know one thing that comes from planaria is it can actually come from tap water.
Alright.
Yeah, so it could just come out of tap water. Now, it's not too much of a problem in fish tanks because your fish will actually eat them. If shrimp-only setups, that's when it's a bit more of an issue because they can actually go under the shells and start eating the shrimps, and it kills them off. It stops them molting, so if you have a shrimp-only setup, if you have a planaria in there, it's a bugger, but it can be stopped if you just put some fish in, little micro-species like Celestiopildanios. That'll certainly help with a shrimp tank. They shouldn't eat your shrimp, they're quite small, but that's the way. As I'll explain to what I'm doing at the moment. So we've got this substance here that's on the pots. It's called rock wool. Now, it's one of those things that I've seen a few people do where they'll plant a plant in, just like that. Probably take the label out, but plant it in. And the plant, it's just like any plant. You have it in your garden. You might have heard the term pot bound. Your aquatic plants can do the exact same. They can get swamped to the plant, and obviously they're already big enough to go in there, so they'll not grow to their full potential. A lot of times they'll struggle to get their roots through, and that way they can't grow properly. Not only that, rock wool's piped full of nutrients to allow the plants to survive whilst they're in the show tank over there until somebody buys them. And it's great for whilst they're in here because it keeps them alive, but the second you put that in your fish tank, it releases it into the water, and that can cause algae. Plants and algae are always in combatants, so they're always at war with each other, and the only way to essentially limit the algae is with light and nutrient export. So if there's too much nutrients and you're getting quite sufficient light in there, you'll end up with algae. There's a few different types of algae out there. So there's diatoms, or brown algae as it's known as. Tends to come in, especially new setups, very early on. It can sometimes be called new tank syndrome, and that is more down to waste in the tank and excess nutrients. Obviously whilst the plants are still settling in, and if you've got any fish in there, they'll certainly produce it. It's one of those things you just have to do these regular water changes, and that'll help get rid of it. And then just start adding your cleanup crew, which I'd always go for if you're doing a planter tank. Horned nearite snails are my favourite, because they can also eat a different type of algae that I'll get onto. Amano shrimp, really good one as well. They eat algae, as well as decaying plant matter and anything like that. If there's anything that's blocked off the lights, they'll eat all the leaves up and things like that. Otter cinclus, great little catfish. Don't get too big, but it sucks on the leaves.
Like every algae member, like red algae, brown algae.
Yeah. So what they do is that'll help manage the cleanup crew. And I always say plant tanks are a little bit more like a reef tank in how you set them up. So I would always put the cleanup crew in first. That way they can get going, eating everything up. Then start adding your fish after that. But you ideally want, really, I'd say about 2 weeks before you put any fish in, if you can. Obviously, if you've got a tank that you're just redoing, just add them in straight away and then get your cleanup crew in as well. But if you're doing a new setup, cleanup crew first, after about 2 weeks, I'd say. So leave the tank running 2 weeks so the plants can grow in. 2 weeks, cleanup crew in, leave them in a week or two, and then start adding your first lot of fish and just build it up slowly that way. And that way it'll be a lot better. Obviously with the rock wool, like I said, it does have a bit of nutrients in it, but don't worry too much if you've got some left on the roots. There's ways of getting rid of it. One of them I always find that I can't really do today because I haven't got a tub with me, is if you have a bowl of water next to you. So I have this little handy tray that I put my plants in. I sometimes have a jug, bit of water, just rub it between your fingers and your thumbs under water and that'll break it off. The other method, you can either use your plant tweezers or a kitchen fork, can help as well. Yeah?
Use the what? Oh yeah, that's smart, yeah.
Yeah.
A wide sort of
wide. Yeah, the thicker part of the corn rather than...
Yeah. Anything like that. And it'll get, as you see, the majority of it off.
Good to get out though, isn't it?
It's very difficult, yeah, and it is I'd say, it doesn't matter too much if you've got a little bit on there, but you want to get the majority that you possibly can off. Let's see, there we go. Nice little plant already sorted. And it's a good job as well, like when you're doing planted tanks like this, when you've got to prep a lot of plants. If you can, keep them nice and moist on the top with like a paper towel or something like that, kitchen roll. Just put it on, spray it, and then they'll stay nice and moist. Plants like Java Fern, they're a devil for going dry quite quickly. So to save them, yeah, just put a bit of a damp paper towel, give them a spritz every now and again. I know they've stole the sprayer from me, so I don't know where they put it. But not to matter, we shall persist. I mean, they will dry out a little bit, but as soon as the water's in the tank, they'll be fine.
So are you going to have them growing front back then? Is that?
Yeah, so I'm going to have a lot of the plants, like the taller plants, will be growing out the back and down. We'll have more of these foreground plants in and around the wood and the rocks at the foreground. And then all the epiphytes like the Anubias and the Java Fern, we're going to have layered over the wood.
On the actual wood itself?
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to wedge it in naturally, but if not, I've got some super glue somewhere that the guys have got me right there, and I'll just glue it on. Don't need a lot of glue, but it's the best way to do it. But yeah, we can get this Anubias in now. It's just finding a good place to put it, which I think possibly might be.
They grow right big, don't
They can do. As I was explaining to you, I didn't catch your name, sorry. Ashley. So I was telling Ashley earlier that if you use CO2, you can actually find like Anubiases that come like this one. This is Barteri, but when you get Nana, it's a little bit smaller, but it's got leaves around about that kind of size in a low-tech system. In a high-energy system, where you're using CO2, you can have like the leaves be about that kind of size. It'll be no bigger than like a 20p. It grows really compact and dense because they're low-light plants that don't need all this high energy. And because they don't need that, they grow a lot more compact because they don't have to waste their time growing leaves to get the light. They can go small.
That's why I've grown massive then, because we've got a low-tech.
Yeah, so in a low-tech system, a low-energy system, they will get huge. And they still look very nice. They're a really nice feature plant, but in a high-energy system, yeah, they'll grow a lot more compact. They'll grow like obviously more on the rhizome because that'll grow a lot quicker. But they'll end up with these really nice, tiny, petite leaves, which are really, really nice. Java Fern, unfortunately, is not the same. Java Fern just gets huge, but it is a great statement plant. I absolutely love it.
You've got loads in it.
Yeah, there's it.
Tied into coconuts.
Yeah.
We boiled up a lot of coconuts, cut them in half, created little caves. We haven't stacked them and then tied Java Fern to it. And each thriving now. Because we had it planted before, we didn't know it planted.
Yeah, when we first got them in.
Planted because there's not much information out there. We figured it out when it started to die. Alright,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
these like baby things off the edge.
Yeah, so that's the best thing. So where it naturally grows, it will grow these little plantlets, and basically as it's wafting in the water, as the current gets so strong, as the plant gets bigger, it essentially will pull it off the mother plant, and that'll drift off downstream and eventually get lodged on its own little piece of wood, and then it will grow from there. And
so that won't be because of a plant, or were it because of a plant?
what, as if it planted in the substrate?
We're growing loads of little leaves off. We had it planted actually in substrate.
So in the substrate, what it would be doing in that situation is it'd be because it's in the wrong condition. So epiphyte plants like this don't like being planted in substrate. If you just plant them in rocks, they can grow in there, but they don't.
Like the roots being compacted or
Yeah,
squat.
it basically suffocates the plant.
Like surviving on it's like the coconut
Yeah.
just surrounding them.
Yeah, so you find your one on your coconut will be doing a lot better,
Yeah.
but it basically suffocates the roots, and then it can't grow. So what it'll be doing is going into like action station
Yeah.
and growing its little plantlets so that it can survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smart.
Plants are very smart. They can do a hell of a lot of things.
Sheffield water's super soft.
It's great. Yeah, it's great for plant keeping. Sheffield water.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry, I've got to harden it up a bit, but
yeah.
for plants it's fine.
Plants is absolutely fine. A lot of fish as well. You'll find a lot of fish will prefer it softer water. Just because.
In Japanese point, when you're going in the mud ponds, that water's dead soft.
Yeah. They definitely are. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put the jar ferns in there for now, whilst I'm just prepping the plants. We'll figure out where we're putting them later on. But yeah, no, Sheffield water's great for keeping a lot of fish and breeding a lot of fish as well. If you ever want to go into like breeding fish, a lot of dwarf cichlids will love it.
Done it accidentally, but no intention of doing it again.
Shrimp at the minute.
Yeah.
Loads of
Shrimp are great. Yeah, you could just chuck shrimp in and they'll just breed like mad. It's the best thing about shrimp. Amanos don't know them. So Amanos, they need brackish water to hatch their eggs.
Get pregnant a lot though, and like
yeah.
carry the eggs.
Yeah, the best thing is that they will disperse the eggs out, and your fish will just eat them.
Oh yeah.
So it's great, like sort of not live food as such, but it's a good protein source for a lot of fish.
It's hilarious when she drops them and then all shrimp start going crazy. You've got like
Yeah, yeah.
trying to show
20 Amano shrimp all chasing each other. Fish is just like, what's going on? What's going on here?
piggybacking off the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they jump from fish to fish, which is hilarious.
Yeah, no, Amanos are just something else.
I like shrimp anyway, I just think they're a really good shoot to any time.
Definitely say if you ever want to get some that are like a little bit harder to keep, but they're a really nice one and slightly more of a premium price, the crystal shrimps are a lovely one to go
got
for.
3 of them.
Got 3 of those.
Most expensive better meal I've ever given it. We didn't realise that you would eat it, and female better. 15 quid for shrimp just gone in like a day. But we've got Shakira shrimp, which are nice, the red and white ones.
Yeah.
I call them Shakira. They're so high. Yeah, they're nice.
Yeah, they're a nice one. Yeah, I used to have a nice breeding colony of crystal shrimp.
Nice.
They're mixed colours, but yeah, I had a bit of an issue with a planaria outbreak because I used to keep them as a shrimp only setup. They decimated them all. So I'll get some more eventually. Just finding them at the right price at the minute.
Yeah, they're super expensive. Especially we had grade A ones as well, so they're like,
Yeah.
they were really white and really defined red and white.
They were really tasty as well.
Oh yeah.
Tasty treat.
Yeah. Funny enough, that bet is really healthy.
Not surprised.
Shrimp on there.
Premium diet.
No fibre bites for you, my friend. You get shrimp.
Yeah, trouble with betters is they do eat shrimp,
Yeah.
but they are a nice fish.
It's just there's a lot to learn with them. They're not like plated or a molly. Like they're just like learn as you're going along. They're quite very temperamental.
Yeah.
Like, male's more fun than female. Females are lovely. The male is way more fun. Feeding him by hand, and you realise that power does not why they kill everything. Literally knocks your hand back when it goes through there.
Super sized it up.
Yeah,
It's an
well, we fed it shrimp now, so he's got used to it.
Yeah,
Tastes for blood.
you find each better you get is a different fish.
Massively
Completely.
different,
They're just like people. Like there's so many different personalities, and
I just realised that was where all the betas were.
Yeah, they're down here now.
it is. Yeah, they moved.
I come over there, I'm like, where are they?
They moved them specially for me. But yeah, no, each better is completely different personality. Like I was telling you before, like I got 2, and one is
Male or female?
both males.
Alright.
Yeah, so I've got one. My girlfriend picked one, and mine is totally the most peaceful fish I've ever owned. He won't harm anything. I mean, he's gone for shrimp, but he's too slow to even get him. And he's so placid and tame, and he'll sit watching me playing on the PlayStation or watching TV. He'll just sit watching the TV.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I watch you. I'm
Um,
in the office inside of me, and he watches me.
Yeah.
He's watching me, and I turn around and he'll be like, all right.
and he's just so placid. Yeah, he's a great little fish, and I've only had him about a year, but he's lovely. And hers is just complete opposite. He's just angry all the time.
They all look grumpy though, don't they?
They do all look grumpy. They've got grumpy old men faces.
Miserable.
But yeah, he goes around because his tank's, it's not recommended, but it is quite close to a window and doesn't get direct sunlight, but it certainly gets a little bit. And he will go from the second, like now, where it's getting like light at 5 in the morning. He'll go from then straight till, well, when we go to bed about 11, 12 o'clock. It's just fighting his own reflection all the way around the tank, all day. And like,
You're supposed to get him to fly though, anyway.
yeah, it's good. It's good to exercise those muscles, otherwise they do lose them. Because we did get, my other one never does it, so we did get him a budgie mirror.
Little mirror, yeah.
Just clip it over the side of the tank, and he'll go and fly over for it. About 10-15 minutes, just take it out. And he's back to being placid again. He's a great little fish.
We put snails in, and he was so agitated for about a day. He was like,
Oh yeah. So Izzy's better. We were watching it last night, and we've got 2 onion near-out snails, and one was going right to the top, and he literally went from flaring with his own reflection to suddenly starting on a snail, and he wasn't bothered. It's just a snail just going up and down like.
Well, I bet he loves this one corner where he goes back to, and he goes around, he has a wander about, and then he goes into the corner, and the snail decides to go the other night, and he's like, he's just what are you doing?
Staring at it, it's like, what are you doing in my corner?
Like, snail's like, what, mate? I just want to get some algae. Algae up here. Trying to get a algae.
That's what they do. It's funny.
What, glaring at it though?
No, you aren't.
Staring
You're just
at it
staring at it like,
shit.
you're in my place.
Yeah, they are moody.
They're cool fish though. If you keep fish, you've got to keep at least one of them.
Yeah.
At least once, just to understand how cool they are.
100%. As I say, there's a big debate online, like about tank sizes, that what's recommended, but I'd say it all depends what you're keeping with it. Each better's different. Some like bigger tanks, some don't.
Well,
Yeah.
Appy's, he's been in a little like 10 litre tank.
Yeah.
Loves it. It's his favourite place. Like, I've never seen it as
It's his
Appy.
domain, isn't it?
That's
It's like-
Constantly like, he's always fins are
There's a
all
middle
spread
ground
out.
in there. You don't need something
Yeah.
massive.
No, well, they don't like stuff
A lot
like
of
that.
them are stupid small.
Oh yeah, they're little like jugs and stuff.
You go abroad and they're in vases on
Yeah,
tables.
I know
It's
that.
like,
That to me, that's just like.
we're taking all them home.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would.
I've got to rescue it.
Yeah, I mean, well, where they come from nature is like rice paddy fields.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
little puddles and like little crevices, don't they?
Yeah.
That's where they tend to- yeah, I looked at that.
And they make a little territory, but I say each fish is different. Like some will have bigger territories than others.
Yeah.
You just have to gauge it on what your fish needs. But I'd say even if it's in like a relatively small nano tank, as long as it's given regular water changes, like say a 10 litre twice a week water change,
Yeah.
if not 3 times, it's going to be a doddle for you to do anyway.
6-5 minutes.
Like Alex was using a 45 litre.
45
Molly's
litre,
and she
yeah.
loves it in there.
She's
All
the
the
happy.
bubbles
She's
will come out
been
now.
there. She's always have come out now. Whereas before she was quite
dull.
bland. Yeah. Now she's like got blues and blacks. And it's like a creamy colour. Very
Tell when
nice.
they're happy, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
I don't know.
It's crazy though, isn't it? Because like you think fish, people like think fish. You don't really like it. But you can literally you can sit there and watch them all and you figure out you've all got different personalities. Every single one of them like.
Yeah.
Well, I keep a lot of koi and carp and things like that.
Alright,
And
what?
I go fishing a lot. So
Yeah.
it helps with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
What,
watch
catch
them
your own
feed and
koi?
I go, oh yeah, I run with it. You know, I'll become pot.
Yeah.
Big koi out and I'll become pot with it.
Yeah.
It's real, yeah.
No way. What on
I
fish
didn't know they
pond?
have
On
them,
Eastern Abbey?
Yeah. That's koi.
Yeah. Oh god.
Decent tank. Nice carp.
Nice.
Nice big goldfish.
They stopped that bit, don't they?
Yeah, they're all what's in India. They tidied it up, council have had a good tidy up of it, and if we done all edges.
That's what I grew up with.
Some new stuff in there.
On my mates over there.
Yeah, it's not too bad. That weed's not too bad. There's a nice lily bedded middle. It's not too snaggy. I know it used to be stupid.
Yeah, it's
before.
terrible. Could never fish it.
Only if a load of kids put a load of carp in it, there's more carp in and out. But they've not been stopping that council and people putting it in. So there's some fishing there, some great content. Some nice gold. Yeah, I do a lot of fishing. So watching fish and then going, right, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
That's how they're acting today.
Yeah.
Try that here.
Yeah, you probably find like if you got like fishing lakes and there's like koi in it, it's usually someone that's chucked it in.
Yeah.
It's got too big for the pond, and
Yeah, you just
Don't usually grow
go like
natural
that.
like that.
Them wild cows
I've
you
seen
get on
odd
ponds.
ghost carp that's come from rivers and commons breeding, and you've got that sort of growth, but it's not really a point.
Yeah.
But usually they've got something from somewhere.
There is it, yeah.
There's a massive orange koi in Great Barn. About £6. Wow, they've tried. Not a lot else in there, but that's in there.
That's in there.
Because he's eating everything.
That's my next job when I've got a sort of garden I'm going to do. So I'm going to design it all around having a pond in there, but it's going to cost me a lot of money. So
I'd recommend getting that rubber line out of this area. That's the best line I've seen anyway.
yeah.
Anyway, if you ever feel at any of these ponds, if you ever feel it, that's the same line as
So there you get two different liners that they use, which is one is this PVC and the butyl rubberized liner.
rubberized.
So
I use that for lining plant pots.
yeah,
That's
it's
fine.
it's
If you're doing a proper pond, use it for that.
it's about twice as much in terms of price, but the advantages you get over it is butyl is a little bit easier to manage when you're trying to fold it out, so you can get less folds in it. PVC is a little bit more rigid, so trying to get the folds in there, it's a lot harder to deal with. And obviously PVC compared to the butyl it does go a little bit more brittle in the sun.
Yeah.
So if it's shaded, PVC is fine.
But it's like winter and stuff in summer.
Yeah.
The rubber that's going to last.
Yeah. And I know from what the guys were telling me, if you do like a rectangle pond, a square pond or anything, and then get what they call a box weld liner.
Yeah.
So that's what they put in these ones, which are it's the butyl liner, but basically you don't have any creases in it, so it's like it comes ready to fit in.
Yeah, you just slot it straight.
Yeah. So it's a lot better for you in terms of management, but costs a little bit more. So, but this is a great plant. Has anyone used any of this before? Or do you even know what it is?
No.
It's got a really nice name. It's called Schismatoglottis. And it grows similar to a crypt, but its leaves are, I always think they look a bit more like Bucephalandra, if you've heard of that one, but they're a bit more like Anubias, so they've got like the waxy count, but it's a really nice plant. But this grows, it can grow in substrate. So if you want sort of like an Anubias looking plant, but to grow in your substrate,
Yeah.
this one's the best one.
I've got an
Yeah, it's a great plant. As you can see, it gets really dense growth. So I could split this and get loads of plants from it.
plant department. She researches them and goes, right, this one we need that one for this and this one for this. I just go, yeah, they look great.
Do you ever know when the best time to buy plants is?
No.
No.
An offer.
When they're on offer is definitely a good one. But best time to ask, if you ask the guys, they'll tell you exactly what day their plants turn up. Buy them when they first come in. The fresher you get the plant, it's basically out of the greenhouse. So they're out of the greenhouse, in a box, shipped. So if you can get here whilst they're unpackaging them, or just after they've done it, it'll essentially be as fresh as possible.
And you can pick the best ones as well.
Pick of the choice, yep, pick of the crop. So a really good way to do it, but really nice.
They can plant straight in substrate.
These can plant straight in substrate, yeah. So that's what we'll be doing with this one. But it's a really nice plant.
I've just got somewhere to go for one. I'm going to leave it.
It's no worries. Nice meeting you.
I'll be down to keep on looking at it. I'll have a chat with
Yeah,
this guy.
no worries.
So,
I'll. So, but yeah, it's a really, really lovely plant. This. It's highly overlooked because I mean you get your popular plants, but there's a lot of plants that get overlooked. And there's some like, because do you mainly just keep green plants in your tank?
Yeah. We to be honest with you, like we've all sort of been the first tank we did. That one was planned and done properly. Always has been emergency, so they kind of just been like
Just set up.
grab some stuff. So
Okay.
this is what we're doing now. Is we're going to go through one tank by tank and redo them, but we've got to do it quick because obviously so I'm thinking I might build structures outside the tank and then just swap them in and put them in and do it that way.
Yeah.
So it's tricky innit, when you've got like fishing there, you've got to be careful. And you've got shrimp all over the place. So
Yeah.
again, you can't just dump rocks in because they'll get squashed. So
That is true.
it's like it's going to be tricky, but that's what we're going to do. But I like the idea what you were saying about building at height. So I've kind of got an idea in the end of like getting a box full of mountain rock and starting down one side and then a little one at side in it, and then sort of like substrate front plants in there, and then
Sounds very nice.
lighter at sides and then little rocks, which she'll work on it for me anyway. But
Yeah.
something
No,
like
that's
that, so that's one of them. And then
That
another one
sounds great to me.
right above it.
Creative one.
So I'll start planting some of these plants so I'm making it a bit more special. These aren't, no, so these are actually a crypt. So this is called Cryptocarani balansae. It's one of the tallest crypts you'll find. It can actually reach 2 foot plus in height. It's a really tall one. Its leaf structure is very similar to Java fern. You just get that sort of crinkly look, which with most crypts it's quite a flat looking big leaf, whereas they are quite nice and they get really thin needle leaves, but they go really tall. They can change a little bit in colour the higher you get to light, so they'll get like a little bit more of a browny olive colour in them as they get closer to the light, but they look really nice. But yeah, I'm going to plant them this side, so as it grows up the flow will take it over.
Put those in substrate now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can plant these in substrate. Crypts can also grow onto things. They can be used as an epiphyte, but they are a really nice plant to go for. Especially if you're looking for something like a tall black background plant. So these aren't my good pair, are they?
It's a big toolkit, isn't it?
It is, yes. So I've got a mixture of all sorts in here. There's premium tools and cheaper tools, but you got to start out somewhere. Tools aren't cheap.
Yep.
So I started out with just your basic plant growing tools. I bought a set off of Amazon. It cost me $10.99 for the whole kit, and yeah, served its purpose. But building on it now, yeah, I want something a lot better and a lot more durable. So
Better quality, you can feel it, can't you?
So this one is Aquavitro, which is a Seachem product. It's a really thin needle on the front, so it's a lot better. They're more budget friendly for tools if you want something a little bit better. And Awase have quite a good tool range out as well. They come in quite a nice galvanised like black look, so that's really nice as well. But they're not too expensive. Then you go for JBL. JBL's premium range. Not necessarily the best. I wouldn't say that like for a premium range they're not the best tools. It's just a premium price. I don't know if it's something to do with their name that they're thinking we could charge what we want.
Yeah.
But yeah, personally I don't really find them that much better than the more budget. Yeah. Pretty much is, yeah. You got budget, you got your middle ground range, and then your premium range would be ADA, which you're looking about for like a pair of snips like 60, 70 quid, which is for a tool is a lot of money to spend. But yeah, don't get me wrong, if I had all the money in the world, I'd have the whole lot. But it's a lot of money to splurge out in one go. Yeah, pretty much. pretty much is a day's age. And I mean, when you've got things in the world going off that everything's going up in price and it's so uncertain on electricity bills, it's like, it's a lot of money to think, do I waste that? But again, you can do it the way I've done it, is start off with a cheap set and then build your way up. I mean, the Superfish ones the guys sell here, they're quite really budget friendly. They're like, I think 10, 12 quid a tool, which is, it's not bad at all. I'd say all you really need is the pincers and some scissors. But I'd say go for the pincers first, so the forceps, and get the scissors after. You know, you can always use your household scissors to start with, or just buy a house pair. Or if you've got a very kind wife or girlfriend, then you can ask him, can I borrow some? That you'll not give back. But yeah, it's an interesting bit. I mean, don't get me wrong with this hobby, you can spend a fortune, but you don't need to. There's ways of doing it. I mean, this tank will probably work out quite a hefty tank to plant out, and with the substrate, if you're doing it this way.
I did quick maths on it, I know that.
Yeah. It's you're going to get like, I mean, well, the planting substrate alone we've probably used at least, I think it's 40 quid a bag, so 80 quid so far. It's 30 quid a piece for them.
180 quid for wood.
Probably you got 90 quid's worth of rock. So it's a lot. But as I say, that's where you work around it in terms of size. Like, if you want to do something nice and make it look this way, go smaller. So if you go smaller with it, you can have something looking like this, but on a smaller scale. And that way you can make it. Thank you. It's got my sprayer back. You can, yeah. And I'd say it's always better. I mean, my 70 litre, I think with like all the equipment and stuff that I've probably spent on it, oh, I dread to think the cost that I've spent on it. You know, I've got an Awazi Biomaster 350 on it, which aren't cheap and definitely overpowered. I think I worked out, I think it filters it about 15 times an hour, but the fish don't struggle in it. And Awazi, I'd say Awazi the best brand to go for filtration systems. They are more of a premium price, and you'll generally find this with any filter. You can get the budget range, and especially with any filter, it's always the same. Budget range have more media have to change on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So you've got to come back and spend, you know, best part of 10 to 20 quid every month or every couple of months. Whereas the more premium range, if you pay like the extra 80 quid, you think, oh, saved on the filter, you don't have to change anything. So the Awazi ones just have sponging, which
just washing them out and then waiting until they
yep.
dry, and then change them out.
Exactly. And the thing with the Awazi ones is as well, they've got so much in terms of the technology that's inside them. They have the pre-filter section, so you probably heard never run your filter media under the tap. Kills all the bacteria off. So the pre-filter sections in the Awazi are actually designed to do that. You run it under the tap because that collects all the waste, and then your actual media inside stays pretty clean, and that's just for harbouring your bacteria, so you won't have to open it up that much. And not only that, inside the Awazis you can get a model that's called the Thermo, and the Thermo is, it basically it's just got a heater inside it as well. So you can take the heater out of the tank, put it in there. But if you look at the price of their heaters, minus that off the cost, you're actually looking probably about 20 quid to 30 quid more than a cheap brand filter. So it's not too bad for the price they charge for it.
Well, when you're eating in the filter as well, it's less, it's more efficient. You're not trying to eat up a large body of water, you're eating up water as it's going in.
Yeah.
A bit like a central heating unit.
Essentially, and it obviously takes it out of the tank, which, you know, we want to try and take as much equipment out of the tank as possible.
Yeah.
So it's great in that aspect, especially if you've got a small tank. because there's not a lot of room to play with in the first place. And I was even there's the one called the Filto Smart, I believe it's called, which is a nano external, and they go for around about the same price as what you probably pay for the Fluval external 07 range, depending on the size that you get. So I think the smallest one is the 60, and that's a really dinky little filter. It's about this kind of size, and it has a clip that you can buy as an optional extra to clip on the side of the tank, or just have it underneath.
You can have it hanging outside the tank.
Yeah, but it's just an external. But it's great, and so I've had the Filto Smart 100's pretty decent. That's the one I had. That has the slot for the heater in it as well. But they're great little filters. That powered my little 30 litre tank for about 3 years before I got rid of it. So it's nice. I've still got the filter. Kept that, but yeah, I've got rid of the tank because it was so scratched and everything by the end of it. So that's it's one thing to take into note. Another good thing as well with like talk about scratches with your glass. Obviously, sand is terrible for it. Is you don't want to go too low when you're wiping the tank compared to scratching it, because if you're going to pull it up with your algae pads or magnet cleaners or whatever you're using, and you'll scratch the front of the glass, which is not what you want.
So front, you want it quite low.
Best way, yeah, you want it as low as possible, but best way is wipe the glass as you usually would, and then when you get to the point where you're sort of really about here, just go very gently, and I'd invest in like a razor blade cleaner, so they're like usually on a stick, similar to the gravel scraper that I've got here. And you essentially just go down the glass, just like that, and you won't pick any gravel up with that. But it means that you can get that nice little bit of algae that's stuck.
That scum at front where,
Yeah.
especially gravel, sort of settled in between.
It is, yeah.
It's not just algae, it's like
And the main thing really is if you do regular maintenance, you shouldn't get that much algae. Especially once you've got a cleanup crew in there as well. There shouldn't be anything that really forms that is too noticeable.
We've got an issue with a rock that's got it looks like red slime algae.
It's another one, yeah. 'Cause I just realised I stopped talking about algae, didn't I? So I got halfway through. So yeah, we got to diatoms, didn't we? So yeah, we got green dust algae. So that is little dust specks that you probably find on the glass. It's the main cause. That's just really light and nutrients, but anything green is usually caused by light. You got the green thread algae, which is like a little bit like blanket weed in ponds. Filamentous algae, that comes from light as well. Then you've got staghorn algae. Staghorn algae comes really from like the silicates in the water, which is generally down to like sands and the rocks, and it can come from tap water as well. It's a little bit more tricky to get rid of, but it kind of looks like coral when it grows, or the reason we call it staghorn is it looks like it's a deer antler. And it grows very like sort of upright. It doesn't look particularly nice because it's black or grey in colour. Best thing to do that is liquid CO2, which commonly misconcepted as like, oh, it's CO2 for the plants. It's not, it's an algae killer. That's why the plants grow a lot better. So rather than dosing the water with it, if you get a little pipette or a syringe, just drop it on top of it, leave it 10 minutes whilst the tank's drained, and then fill it back up, and it should start dying off. It'll either go white in colour or red, depending on the type it is, and it'll die off, and your fish will probably eat it as well.
So any kind of red algae,
This is like a burgundy colour, and it doesn't grow up, it's just on the surface of the rock.
So what that probably is it's probably blackbeard algae. Now blackbeard algae is very similar. It's sort of like very tufty but low down, and it'll be black and grey, and quite when you take it out, it'll be quite slimy to touch. But it's just blackbeard algae. That it's one of the more nuisance types, and it tends to grow a lot on this kind of rock. Once it's in there, it's a very devil to get rid of it.
It's like white and grey rock. It's like not white short, it's orange.
Okay, right, yeah.
It's like, and it came on that. We think
It's only that rock that's
it
got
was
it.
only that rock that got it, and it won't go off it, and it had spread
Dropped it out
anywhere
there,
else.
and
Yeah.
it just comes back again.
It's probably not come on it, but it's probably the chemicals it's kicking out in the tank that's where it likes to grow.
Right.
But if you take some of the liquid CO2, drop it on top of it, and that'll kill it.
It won't be long,
Um,
it's gonna shift and over.
It won't do, no. If you use it in generally small doses, you don't need a lot. Just to drop it on it. Might take a few attempts to do it, but it'll start killing it off. Just drain the tank down. You don't need to take the rock out whilst in there, unless you can. Yeah, if you can take it out, just drop it on it then, and then pop it back under after 10 minutes. And you should find it all just start falling off. But usually, if it's going red, it's a sign that it's dying anyway. It just needs something to eat it. Mono shrimp, yeah, anything like that, yeah. They should have a go. But yeah, it's a sign that it's most likely is dying. But they're really the kind of algae you can get. There is one that a lot of people call blue algae, which is cyanobacteria. That's quite a really deep green in colour, and it's quite slimy.
Quite fluorescent green.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like that.
Usually grows on your substrate. Yeah. It can still come back, but main way to get rid of that is if you get an antibacterial treatment, and again with like a syringe, just basically dose it into it, and it'll kill it off. But yeah, algae is tricky, but I'd always say the best way to get rid of algae is excessive plants. Obviously plant it out as heavily as your budget will allow, but just keep getting plants in there. Obviously if you've got plants like that can grow, like the limnophilia you were telling me about, that grows like mad, so if you can plant the tank out with lots of fast growing stem plants, it'll go really well, yeah. It's the way it is. It's like I said to you earlier, plants and algae are always at war. So if you can heavily plant it out, and don't get me wrong, like you could plant a plant like that if you want immediate impact. There's either that, do what I'm doing here, where I'm just splitting the plant up, and you're getting more plants for your money then.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, over the time, it might look a little bit sparse in areas where you're planting, but they will fill it out in time.
Yeah, they grow.
And they're going to grow.
That's their own purpose, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they always fill up wherever you plant. Just Java moss,
Moss is one of those things, because it doesn't have...
It grows in mid-air.
Yeah.
So we're still finding it like 6 months on where
Yeah. Moss can look beautiful, especially like if you like putting it on tops of pieces of wood like this. Trouble is when you're trimming it, and bits fall, because it doesn't have roots, it just grows in its own little entity. If you miss a bit, that'll suddenly just start growing into a piece. It is sometimes a nightmare to have an effective looking moss tank, but it can be done. I know a good tip if you like your moss but you don't want moss to start growing everywhere is when you're doing a trimming session, if you can get like a little water movement pump, pop it in the bucket and have a pipe going up and over the top of your tank. So essentially you're doing what we call a rolling water change as such. So you're not really changing the water, but it allows you, if you have a little small siphon, and once you go across, just go around all the bits, or even when you're trimming it. Some people do it whilst you're trimming it, so you cut with your scissors and have your pipe right above it. And that way it'll take all the moss out, but the water level won't change, so you can go for as long as you need to get that moss looking, and you can get rid of it all then.
I saw this one today, it's like a gravel bike, it has a little bike on it.
Yeah, that one of those would help as well, yeah.
Last 70 quid or like.
So what, is it one of the Fluval ones?
I don't know. It's just an advert that came up. This is the problem when you start talking about fish near any social media.
Talk about anything, yeah, on social media, they're always listening.
Constantly getting adverts
Yeah.
for fish stuff, which is helpful sometimes, but the majority of the time just expensive for me.
They're always listening. Let's see what we got here. Alright, so bulbosa. So this is another type of crypt. I love crypts. It's one of my favourite plants to use, just because you can plant them in as that, obviously without the rock wall on, but it'll create that immediate impact. Because it doesn't take long for them to grow in, but something like that, like a bit like the Java fern, you wedge it in a gap, you've suddenly just got an immediate impact in the plant, and they just look so much nicer. And yet there's so many different varieties as well in them. They can go different colours. So with the bulbosa, it'll get the slightly more darker brown leaf to it compared to the Becketii. Let's see, the Beckettii's got the more greenish leaves. One of my favourite ones is Wentii Brown, if you're looking for something a little bit different colour. So that's really nice. And you can even get ones, there's one called Flamingo, Wentii Flamingo, which when it's under good conditions, it will go as bright pink as my drink. Hence its name, Flamingo. Otherwise, it tends to say this like a bit like this, but it'll have pink tinges to the leaves, but more green in the middle if it's in the low conditions. But it's a nice one. It sometimes pops up on the lists here, but it's a bit more of a rarer plant to see. But yeah, with plants like this, we can literally just wedge them in. Yep, just shove it in. Doesn't necessarily need to be fully planted in, because as I say, crypts can grow like epiphytes anyway, but its roots will extend down into that bit of substrate that is down there. Shouldn't do. Yeah, it's wedged in firm enough that it should be holding its own place, and as it grows anyway, it'll attach onto the rocks and into the substrate, so it'll be fine. But yeah, it's just wedged in there. But because crypts, the way they grow is just so dense, that whole patch there will eventually just be like leaves.
I said, like, how would you go on with like gravel cleaning that then? Would you just not bother with it?
So with planted tanks like this, yeah, you don't need to gravel clean. You might want to go like a little bit hoover around on top of the sand, but that's about it. You're not gonna like go around with the whole gravel back as such, because you just disturb everything. The easiest way we combat the lack of gravel backing, because obviously there's going to be fish waste in there, is clean up crows to an extent. I mean, nothing eats fish waste, it's the downside. But we do bigger water changes. So minimum of a tank, like any planted tank I would take out, is 50%. Mine personally, I take them down to just above the fish, so 80-90% water change. Every week? Yep. Obviously, because it combats the excess nutrients, and this is where algae comes into it. So the easiest way to kind of explain, as I can explain it, is like this. So in here, this is my concentrated juice of Robinson's summer fruits. Also, I'm not sponsored by them, but so obviously with juice, you might have done it as a kid. Have you ever taken a sip out of it?
Right, yeah.
It tastes disgusting, and So imagine that being like the fish waste and all the chemicals that are out there, like phosphates. So you're just diluting it, yeah. So the only way to get it down there is by adding lots of fresh water to the tank.
Actually remove the waste, though, does it? So
it doesn't, no. So
you're just removing the result of the waste.
Essentially, so your filter bacteria will break the physical waste down to a chemical form, and that way, by doing the bigger water changes, you're removing that. Don't get me wrong, you can get physical waste out of this tank quite easily as well. The easiest way to do it is, if you go with your hand and just gently waft on top of the substrate, that wafting will get all the waste that's anything like physical that's loose. It'll go up into the water column, and then you just siphon it out. Yeah, so you just siphon it with a pipe straight into a bucket, or if you've got access to a drain or anything like that, straight down it. But yeah, you can get all that waste straight out then, and it'll be a lot easier for you.
Makes sense.
But by diluting it all down with fresh water, you'll not only help the plants, but you'll help the fish as well.
Right.
So it sounds daft, but big water changes actually help the plants.
Yeah, no. They help fish.
So the imagine the nutrients that the plants need. It's like a bit like playing Where's Wally.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you've got a very dirty tank, and this plant needs a specific nutrient, it's a lot harder to find it when there's so much going on in terms of chemical compounds that are in the water. If you keep it clean, it can get, when you put your liquid fertilizer in, it's like, oh, I need more magnesium or potassium, or it can find those elements a lot easier and use them to more better effect.
It's a bit like processed food versus natural food.
Yeah.
It's harder to get the nutrients out of processed food
Yeah,
than it is to get it out of steak, for example, untouched.
definitely.
Same sort of thing.
So if you keep it cleaner, your plants will actually grow healthier. And you'll even find, like, in a low-tech system, you can even get your plants to pearl after a water change, because they'll be able to find these nutrients and use them so quickly they actually start producing oxygen.
Right.
Which you might see if you've watched like any videos on YouTube, like CO2 setups with the oxygen actually coming out the leaves.
Yeah.
You see it actually bubbling. Yeah, you can get that when you do a water change, but they'll only do it really if you do a big water change. Like the plants, when they fill the plant tank up, you come in when they've drained it and it's all fresh. Yeah, they're bubbling away.
Right.
You can even get it sometimes with the plants like this, where if they've been out of the water so long that the base isn't wet, they'll actually float up because there's so much oxygen.
Yeah.
But this is a really nice plant that I'll talk about. So this is actually a nymphoides, which is a type of lily. So it's Nymphoides Taiwan. It's a really easy growing one. Like, you can grow it in quite a low-tech setup. I've got a friend of mine that had one, and he grew his massive. And he grew.
Top then, they'll grow to the top of the cover there.
It can do. Is that like you just trim it? Yeah, it's just like any other plant. You can just trim away. But it's a really nice one. Like if you like your bettas, for instance,
Yeah.
they'll love to like rest on the big leaves that
Yeah,
they get.
they do love it. That's why we've got the thing.
Um,
Similar to that we've put in.
then you've got the other type of lily that I have here, which is the banana leaf lily. So I'll just put that for the camera to see. As you see, the roots look a little bit like bananas, which is quite an interesting one.
Put that one straight in.
Yeah, I've grown it as an epiphyte before. I've grown it in the substrate. It's a really interesting little plant. But I think what we'll do with this, we'll plant this down in this bottom corner, so that it'll grow out and fill that gap up.
Good job, is it?
It's a bit busy day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Takes a long time to plant tanks like this.
It does, yeah. Anything to do with fish takes time. It's not.
Yeah, you've got to pay for it, you can't rock it all.
You have.
You want to be rushed, you won't do it. You'll do it
No.
all, and you'll have to do it again.
I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that because my tanks are so small, that I can plant them fairly quickly. Well, I can do a whole scape fairly quickly. Like, the ladies and gents in the audience, and you yourself probably won't know, but my 70-litre tank, the quickest I've ever scaped it for one of my more complex scapes was around about 3 hours, and that's for doing the hardscape and the planting and filling up and putting. Yeah, that's the quickest I've done it. Sometimes it take me all day. It all depends. So it does help if you've got a rough idea of what you want to do. And it sounds like daft in a sense, but going out in like nature, and if you're going for like a walk in the countryside, and you take a picture of like some rocks on a grassy field, that can give you some ideas of what you want your tank to look like. It can all colour up that way. But, let's see, when do I want to put this one? I'll wedge that under there. Might get some more stem plants out in a minute. But yeah, it is helpful. Nature can be very helpful in terms of creativity. Obviously, like here in Sheffield, you've got the Peak District just round the corner, so it's great for a nice little walk and some inspiration. But just having a look at how like rocks are laid out, you can get it a lot more,
Yeah, you can sort of
a lot more
find
natural.
natural lines that you might not like.
I know we take the dog for a walk quite a lot in the Peak District, but it does definitely help for a bit of inspiration. And obviously there's the layouts in tanks as well to talk about. I tend to go for more of like a nature style, or just where you got rocks and hardscape. That's where it's like everything working coherently. But there's different styles you can do. Some people don't like wood, so you've got what they call an iwagumi, which is just Japanese for rock garden. So with that, you basically just have rocks. There's traditional iwagumis have just one type of plant in there. It's usually a carpeting plant. You'll have that sort of like just make a whole meadow. Yeah, they look really nice. They're a lot of maintenance, but they look very, very nice. And then you get the non-traditional iwagumis where you'll have like more taller stem plants towards the back, carpeting plants, and it'll essentially be like all coherent. But if it's just using rocks, it classes as an iwagumi. Then you've got jungle style, which jungle style is a bit really doesn't matter. It's just chucking stuff in the tank really, and it's allowing the plants to essentially just go wild, and it has that. There's no set layout of where you put your plants. That it doesn't really matter. And then you've got Dutch style, which it's my personal hatred of Dutch style. Nothing against it. It just doesn't do anything for me personally. But that's where it's usually just stem plants. But you can have carpeting plants in there if you wish. But to do a proper traditional Dutch style, you essentially have segments, and each segment can only be one plant. And usually the rule is with Dutch, I believe it's you're not allowed to use the same plant twice. So each segment will be like part of a tank. Because it's a lot of stem plants, it's a lot of trimming, and it takes a lot of effort to make them look good. But done well, it'll look great. But for me, I just miss hardscape too much with a Dutch to warrant doing it. Yeah, I just love having wood and hardscape and letting it all go together. But if you like plants and you want to get as many plants in there, Dutch might be the best one for you. But it's just not for me. That's what I like as well. If your plants can complement everything, then it's great. And then you obviously choose the fish to complement them as well.
Yeah.
Obviously certain species of fish aren't really suitable. Mainly your bigger cichlids tend to be a bit more uprooting, and they like eating plants.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know some people have done it with the like African rift lake cichlids, using like more Anubias and your more tougher plants, but they can nibble them eventually, and they are more vegetarian in diet. So it depends how well you feed them really, and you clean them out, but it can be a bit more of a struggle. And again with the South Americans, like you got things like your Geovegas and anything like that, they all like to uproot everything, so they're not worth it. I'd say if you want to put cichlids in the tank, go for dwarf cichlids, because they're really great. And the best thing about dwarf cichlids is, especially pistogrammas, you can almost turn it into like, imagine like a freshwater reef. So pistogrammas like almost hug the hardscape. They'll come out to the sandy foreground, but they will hug the wood and everything like that, which is really cool to see. But just go for scale. Bigger fish tend to make your scapes look smaller. So if you have a big tank and you fill it full of big fish, your scape will look smaller. Whereas if you had a scape like this and we're going to fill it full of like tiny little fish, it'll look massive in comparison. Especially like if you come here, you got these little tiny little fish.
Yeah, some guppies in there.
Yeah, it'll look a lot bigger with guppies or even endler guppies. Like the smaller the fish, the bigger your scapes will look, which makes it even look huger. Not to say obviously big fish are nice if you like big fish, good for you. But it's just a tip that if you want something to look bigger, go for smaller fish. And not obviously a bigger tank, smaller fish, you can have more fish in there. So there's ways around it. Done a terrible job with that one, haven't I? So you're alright, you got any questions? Just enjoying. Alright, so you got tanks at home?
No, I've got a decent sized pond, but never had a tank.
Fair enough. Is it a fish pond or just a wildlife pond? Yeah.
I've got plenty of fish.
All right.
A couple of monsters.
Is it? You got plants in? Yeah.
Not much. Fish can literally just take them out and just throw them all over the place. So just a decent sized lily and a couple of other big birds.
Tends to be the case. If you ever want some, I know they have the floating baskets. They might be a little bit better for you. And you can have some nice plants in there. Give them a spray down. There we go. I'll get Java fern sorted now. This is the super glue time. As I say, so if you're ever using super glue, you can come here and buy essentially aquarium straight super glue. So you know it's going to be safe. There's either that, you can just use, if you look on the back of it, to say cyanoacrylate. As long as it says that, it's fine. It basically just means it's going to set to plastic when it's finished. And any super glue, try and avoid getting it on your fingers, but sometimes it's inevitable. I found one thing that does help dissolve it a bit is antibac. The alcohol in it tends to dissolve it a little bit easier. So there we go. Could do, but it's cheaper enough to use super glue, to be honest.
And it don't bugger the roots up, probably.
No, so you where it sticks down, you'll always get like a little bit of die off. It's just inevitable, even with moss. Like you'll just notice it going brown, but the rest of the plant will carry on growing. That you'll never even notice it. So yeah, with the roots like this, yeah, they'll die, but the rest of the plant can still survive. So that's why you only use a little bit. Obviously, if you use too much, yeah, the whole plant could risk dying.
I've seen people making little bonsai trees, and I've always seen them use like Java moss and stuff. But I saw one the other day with somebody had broken open a moss ball.
Yeah.
And I was like,
They don't grow.
Yeah. So moss balls are actually a type of algae. Yeah. They're slow growing, but yeah, they do grow pretty well if you like break them open. I once did it on a piece of like corbo root like this actually, and grew it over the top. It looked pretty nice, yeah. It was actually quite cool because it was CO2 injected. It starts pearling. It was like a bubble mat of moss balls, but yeah. Super glue. Yeah. Just basically cut an X, a little bit like peeling Brussels sprouts really, and then put my thumb in it and just flatten it out. Yeah. Stick it on. But yeah, with the bonsais, yeah, you can do anything like that you want to.
I don't think I'm going to bother making one. We did it one way. I definitely think over top of some rocks will look cool.
Yeah, it'll look pretty nice.
Like, spread it over top of it.
Yeah, it'll definitely look really nice. Well, the best thing with cyanoacrylate, as soon as it hits water.
All right.
Yeah. So it's really good in that sense, is that the second it hits water, it starts curing. So you can basically do this, fill the tank up, and you're good to go. So you don't have to worry like, it's the reason I haven't siliconed any of the hardscaping. It's because I'd have to come back tomorrow and do it. Which is the main thing. go. Let's pull that off there. It's these little plantlets that I broke off earlier. If you get a bit of the rhizome, which is this big fleshy root, so it's got a bit of roots and even one leaf or just no leaves, you can actually plant that and it'll grow a new plant. So that's what I'm going to do with this. Yeah, stick it somewhere, I'll just wedge it in. It should just grow a new plant. Let's see, wedge it in there. So that piece only got one leaf on it, but it'll grow a new plant.
Would grow more leaves
Yeah. In like a few months, that little piece there will end up looking like these.
Yeah.
Not a problem. It's got no issues doing that whatsoever. And there we go. Let's see. So we need a few more plants. Let's see. Go for a hell of a lot of plants doing this. We'll see. I did tell him I was using a lot. Let's have a look. Sorry, mate.
How many more have you got to put in then?
Not too much more. We're probably going to do this. We're doing the stem plants next,
Right.
so that'll be the next easiest bit to do. And then we'll just have a look and probably a few more down these gaps where there's nothing in it
Yeah.
down the front. But yeah, we should be done after that.
Nice.
And then it's just getting the tank filled up. So stem plants are a lovely plant to use. So anything we call a stem plant is, as you can see, grows on a nice stem, get the leaves come off. But the advantage of stem plants is they're very quick growing. A lot of them are. You get odd exception, mainly the pink ones. So any red plants, as we call them. Altananthera is a particularly slow growing one. But it's still effective. And talking about obviously red plants, there's two different types you can get. So there's, like Altananthera, there's a more nutrient depending plant like CO2 and highlighting, etc, etc. But there's also what I found is what we call light depending. So there's a few different plants, and this is one right here. So Hygrophila rosistralis will actually go and change colour the closer it gets to the light, or the more light you give it. And what's interesting with that is you can find like a lot of them come into the store green, and as you take them home they'll actually change colour depending on how good your lighting is. So even with the basic lighting you can get them to go nice like yellow colour or orange colour depending on the lighting they've got, and it can be quite nice. But it acts the same way. The reason they do it is it's a little bit like us when we go out in the sun, you might get a bit of colour.
Yeah.
It's basically the reason you use sunburn essentially is to protect your skin. So that's essentially what the plant's doing, is it's protecting itself from the lights by turning red, which is quite interesting. But it means that under high lighting you can get a lot Rotala is quite a nice one, rotundifolia. There's a few different species you can get of that. So there's Rotala rotundifolia, which will go a nice pink colour. Very light pink, but it's a really nice one. Under really high intense light, it can go quite red, but the best one for that is rotundifolia HW. That will go a really deep pink colour under highlighting. And then you've got orange juice, which will go a really nice orange colour. It almost look like these plastic plants here under really good lighting, which is really interesting for a plant. And that way it means that even in a low tech or a low energy setup, you can get that colour into the tank and not just have everything green, which is quite nice. So we'll start with this one. This is Hygrophila siamensis, which is a really nice plant, grows quite tall, thick leaves as well. Oops. But the best thing is with stem plants as well is, as you can see, they do grow new shoots out of them. But if I were to chop it, which I'd always say chop it at the node where the leaf is, I could replant that and that will grow a new plant. And you can keep on doing that, and if you keep replanting them, and then what I preferably do is chop it, replant the growth, and then trim away any excess. So if you've got, like, as it grows, sometimes you can get somewhere, say all this leaf dies off and you just got this top bit but the rest is stem, replant that and then chop that right down to the substrate, and what will happen is it'll start to grow a new plant, and you'll end up with this sort of time where when this one gets to the point where you need to trim it again, you trim that right down to the bottom, and then the other one will start growing up, and you end up with this like sort of alternating. So you'll end up with it looking nice for more often, really. Like you'll get a couple of weeks where it'll look nice, trim it, a couple of weeks later it'll look nice again, then you trim it, and that's how it is. It's I've seen a good quote, I can't remember who said it, but about planter tanks is they look great for about a week and then they look terrible the rest of the time, just because trimming, that's all it is. But it's the energy you put into it and the type of plants. If you use a lot of stem plants, yeah, I'd definitely say that's the case. It's a lot of trimming involved, but it's well worth the effort. And I say if you overplant as well, like I say, go for as many plants as you possibly get for your budget towards your tank, it'll combat the algae so well that you'll not probably even get any, and you'll end up with a really mature looking tank straight away. But as for everything, I mean, like, you know, plants are expensive, so I'd say you've got the in vitro pots that are a bit more of a higher price, but you do get more for your money, so you could always go for that. And because they're more acclimatized to the underwater environment, they go straight in, they're not going to melt, or there's a lower risk of them melting. So it does make them a lot better. So Schismatoglottis is the one that grows more like a crypt but looks like an Anubias. The one you're thinking of is Crypt Balance. Yeah, I have left some in the tank, so if you're wanting some, there's some available.
No, I don't need it today. I've got to sort out. Design for that one as well. I've got loads of plants already, so I want to decide what.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good thing as well, is like recycling plants. If you've got plants in your tank and you can use them again,
Yeah,
do
we've
it.
done that with a lot of them, took cuttings off and then put them in other tanks.
I would use that one.
One of the records.
Says don't know that, I'll least 40 quid. I've just looked at it, it's under 24. See that one?
There we go. And then this one's a really nice plant as well. So this is Pogastemon stellatus. So this one is a really easy growing plant, I've found personally. So much so that because all my tanks are in my bedroom, I have quite a big window, and getting them away from a window is inevitable. But I actually had it grows up while the light's on, and then the second it's like lights off and it's just daytime, plant does that, grows towards the window, and then grows up. And it ended up a weird shape, but it's a really easy growing plant. And not only that, under lighting it'll go pink, which is great. So you can get that bit of colour in for a little bit easier.
Split it as well.
You can split as well. It is a stem plant, so you just keep on. That's the one, yep. But yeah, it's a really easy growing plant if you want something nice and quick to grow. Similar to the Limnophilia heterophilia. Obviously it's got
It's
quite
not quite tall, that one.
goes really tall, yeah.
Right. You just trim it down and
Just trim it down. Best thing is with stem plants is regular trimming will make them more bushy,
yeah.
so you get better growth from them. So these over, I'll get these ones done. So the plants that I'm putting them into is this, which is a planting substrate. So there's many different on the market. So this one is fluval stratum. Majority of them are all like a volcanic substance, so they're really high in nutrients, and they're basically in a clay form. So they pack them into like a little ball, so it allows the water flow to sort of flow more through them, which stops stagnation, allows the roots to get oxygen as well, and it allows the plants to grow a lot easier, as well as giving them nutrients. So if you're just planting them into like sand or gravel, there's nothing for them to use as nutrients. So you have to use a lot of liquid fertilizer, or majority of people don't even bother doing that, just rely on the fish waste, which it doesn't give everything the plants need. So if you have healthy plant growth, they will really help with the water quality. And you don't necessarily have to, if you don't want to use the planting substrate, because it is quite expensive, you can have like what they call a nutrients power sand, where if you like the gravel look, you essentially put it underneath the gravel, and that way at least the plant roots can get something that they can use as nutrients, and then just use a liquid fertilizer on top of that, and then you'll get loads better plant growth. But don't get any plant growth. Okay, so what kind of fish do you keep? Sometimes that can be a key help as well. Tropical community, okay. So yeah, it probably is down to, I mean, do you just have sand or gravel in there? Yeah, that's probably what it's down to, is just the plants haven't got anything to feed off of.
Did you, to be fair, did you do better, and then I was struggling with debris coming back at me full filter.
Right, okay.
So I upgraded to an FX4, and since then I've got ginger ale water, but that's just by there. I was thinking you might have some sort of carbon filter or something. There isn't.
I wouldn't think it is. I'd imagine because your filter is so good that essentially it's taking all the fish waste that they've probably been living off of. It's actually been sucking it up, so there's nothing for them to actually use when it's on the bottom. So if you change to some more nutrient substrate, yeah, you'll probably find that you'll have better plant growth. Yeah. So the only downside, yeah. It wouldn't necessarily have to start again. The easiest way I would say to do is, if you got an existing filter with existing fish, if you can get like a big Kerber box, something that's relatively decent size in terms of water, fill it up with your tank when you're draining it down, take your filter off, pop your filter on there, pop all your fish into that. That way it'll keep your filter running. So if you need to take like a day or two to do your tank, if it's quite a big tank, which I'd imagine using FX4 it probably is, they can stay quite happily and yeah. So if you want to take a few days to do it, you can have your fish quite happily in the box with your filter going. Obviously, yeah, it's only going to be temporary, so they might end up with a little bit of stress, but it's a better cause than like trying to do it and end up having mud everywhere and it going wrong. Because if you're going to do it, you may as well do it right. But that's what I do with my fishes. I just put them into something so I can take the filter off, put them on there, and do it quickly.
I thought it might have been the lighting might not have been good enough.
It's always possible. I mean, are you using just the standard lights that came with the tank, or have you upgraded? The Aqua 1 lights, okay.
The LED strip on top.
So the best thing to do is, so I'm not too familiar with the Aqua 1 lights, but if you check on the light, if you can find the product model, search it up on the internet and have a look how powerful it is. Really minimum you want is about 7,500 Kelvin to just do basic plants, but it's either that upgrade to something a bit more high powered. Fluval plant lights are pretty easy and they can fit most tanks, so it might be worth investing in one of those and they'll give you a little bit better control. They're all on an app as well, so you can stand on an app, you can set a 24-hour timer, so you can have it turn on whenever you want, turn off whenever you want, and you can also set each individual colour. So if you want to get more reds out your plants, you can actually set more reds to be in your plant light as well. It'll bring the lights out a lot better.
Because I was reading all up about it and I've just got myself a bit stressed out. I heard then it would probably to build the carbon back up within the water. I've been putting a fertiliser in once a week and CO2 daily. Is that right?
Is it the liquid CO2? Right, so there's a common misconception with liquid CO2 is that it's CO2 like with a gas. It's not. What it's designed to do is essentially limit or stop algae growth to allow the plants to grow quicker. That's all it's for. So it'll help with the algae, but it's not really going to do anything in terms of producing CO2 for the plants. Only way to do that is with a gas bottle, which they're a little bit more pricey to go for. You can do bio CO2 if you want something a little bit cheaper, which essentially there's two different methods. You do yeast and a sugar mix, which will, as it ferments, essentially produces CO2, and it'll just put a small amount in there. So for low-tech tanks, it's great because it just puts it in non-stop, and it'll not gas the fish out at all, but it just needs changing more regularly. It usually lasts about a month, and that'll keep going. Or you can use citric acid and sugar, I believe it is, something like that, and that produces a little bit more, but the only downside is if the pressure gets too much, it can explode. And it's not the best if you've got kids or anything around that, but the yeast one's okay, but again, if there's too much pressure in there, it can explode a little bit. But no problem, thanks for coming.
We'll come and have a look one.
Yeah, it'll take a bit of time, but thanks for coming.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you recommend, you see, because the FX4 filter I got in, it were like blowing at the top and blowing loads of oxygen, killing all the bubbles, and that was great. It was really noisy, in the lounge. So,
It is the case, yeah. So if you're getting like your outlet pipe is above the water and it's obviously turbulating the water surface that you're producing oxygen, it's going to make a lot of noise because it's sucking it in. Good for the tank, yeah, don't get me wrong, extra oxygen is great for fish, but if you don't want it, all it needs to be is just slightly rippling the surface, and that is putting enough oxygen in for your fish to survive. So if you want to raise your water level a little bit more so it's not doing that, go ahead. Yeah, as long as it's moving, it's fine.
I heard that the plants needed oxygen as well while the light wasn't on. I don't know if that's true or not.
It is a case, yeah, that's what plants do. So as plants grow, it's in the daylight, they produce oxygen, and at night time they actually give out CO2 and they take oxygen in. It is what they do, but they'll just take in a small amount of oxygen to what the fish need. They'll not harm the fish whatsoever having plants in the tank, but you don't need to have extra oxygen going in there. I've seen a lot of people put like air stones and things in planted tanks, and you don't need them.
That was
Yeah.
the next question, because I were going to put an airline back in.
Yeah, you don't need it. Yeah, as long as you've got your outlet pipes just rippling the surface a bit, that's fine.
And that's enough oxygen for the plant.
Oh, yeah, and fish, yeah, they'll do it fine.
So really then we just I need to change my sand at the bottom.
Yeah, so if you take the substrate out,
Like bubbly stuff.
that's it, yeah. So it's not to everybody's liking, the substrate, planted substrate. Some people like the look of it, others don't. If you don't like the look of it, the best thing to do is what we could do, cap it. So cap it with either the sand or the gravel that you're using previously. That way you can have that look, but you've got the nutrients underneath. So with the planted substrate being a little bit more than the power sand, it does last a lot longer, especially in the low-tech system. I mean, depending on how quickly your plants grow, it can last anywhere from like a year to 2 years up to about 10 years. It all depends on how quickly your plants are growing and how good of a product you are buying as well. So the more like cheaper planted substrates will degrade quicker, so they'll need changing probably every couple of years, whereas the more higher grade ones will last a lot longer in a low energy setup. So if you go to high energy, they'll use it more, but you can see it happening through the glass. You can actually see it like turning into mud essentially compared to like the pellets. When you get to the point where you're replanting plants and you can't pin them in because there's not enough substrate, that's when it needs to be taken out, rescaped.
So would you recommend it to be about that deep then?
Minimum 5 centimetres. Yeah, that's what you want.
What are you doing? Are you just pushing them straight in?
Yeah, so using the tweezers, because it's 5 centimetre depth, you can just go straight in and down and then release, and it'll hold it in place. That way you'll have no plants floating up. Just in, and then you just gently open it and back out. The same way when you're replanting underwater, it's a little bit different to when you're planting like this.
Yeah.
So the easiest way is when you go in, just gently, as you're lifting it up, just gently sort of edge up that way, and it'll keep it in.
Are these in, have you planned to put a bit of something in that top? Or?
No, so these plants here that are stuck onto the wood, these are what we call epiphyte plants. So they don't actually grow in substrate. It actually suffocates the roots, as strange as that sounds, and they can't grow properly. So they actually grow onto things, and this is how they grow in the wild, is that they grow attached to a piece of wood or a rock. And
So that rock, that would actually come with it?
no, I've stuck them onto it, yeah. So there's a few different methods to get them stuck onto it. You can use a bit of cotton, elastic band, anything like that, or you can super glue them on. That's what I've done here. It has to be a certain type of super glue, but you can super glue it onto the rock or wood, and that way to hold it onto place. Super glue is a little bit better because it sticks it immediately, and the type of super glue it is, the second it comes into contact with water, it cures it. So it doesn't cause any harm to the fish or the plant itself. Or the water system, so it's really effective to use. Only downside is when it comes to rescaping, if I rip that plant off, you're going to have like a little blob of super glue. It's a little bit tough to get off, but it is doable. But it's just one of those things. Yeah, this is just a piece of wood, this. Yeah, bogwood, yeah, it's just a generic term for wood that we use, but yeah, you can use it with any type of wood in there, but that means that the plant is going to be stuck on there, so the water's not going to pull it off, and it can grow quite happily. And then with this particular type, it's Java firm, when it's growing new plants, it grows out the leaves, a bit like some ferns, and it'll grow roots and a leaf, and then as the water flow gets it in the wild, it basically pulls it off, it'll flow down, attach somewhere else, and then that'll grow a new plant. Yeah, I've got a one of these that I've had for 8 years now. It's huge. I've only just actually split it for the first time I've had it, so it was about this kind of size across, but I must have got about thousands of little plantlets come off it over the years. But it's an easy plant to grow. It's one of those that doesn't really require CO2 to grow, although even with plants that don't need it, you can put it in there and it'll grow even better. I've grown it in both CO2 and non-CO2 setups, and there's definitely a difference you can see in it, but it's still equally as nice to grow in both.
And does it grow quick?
This is the trouble. So with non-CO2 setups, plants like epiphytes don't grow very quickly. However, because they do come quite large, they can create quite a nice immediate impact straight from the off. Stem plants are probably the best if you want in quick growing plants. So these are the ones at the back, yeah. So all these ones at the back, they're all stem plants. And it's basically just, they'll grow up to the top, you trim them, replant, and keep on going.
See mine, this is my concept. See what we did here, we put like a little, in this rock, we tried putting a little bit of something there, it's just died to death. It was like a little little leaves.
Okay. It depends on the type of plant it is, but it's probably not gone. But yeah, that's an epiphyte plant there that you've got growing on, so that's a nubius.
Anubias, yeah. And I've got sword thing bag.
But we've got nothing underneath that sand.
Yeah, that's probably why your plants are, I noticed with the sword it's going a bit yellow.
But I think that's taking all the main nutrients, and I tried putting some moss balls on end of these bits of bogwood.
Yeah.
Just a bit of...
So swords are inherent, they are vast nutrient, root nutrients, that's what they take, sorry. Yeah. So they are very root dependent in terms of nutrients, so they like a lot from the roots rather than the leaves. You find stem plants take it from both, so they'll not necessarily degrade the substrates as much as a Amazon sword would, but it's probably why it's looking a bit yellow, is that it's not getting enough nutrients for the roots, it's just using the fish waste.
Could I get something like that, put that, and put it in like just a tray and sink that to the bottom?
Yeah.
As the thing is out, and then plant a few
Yeah. So I did have...
When it come out, I just think of it there.
No. So, where's my jug gone? I did have a jug somewhere, I forgot where I put it now. But yeah, it's here. So anything like this, if you cut that off, milk cartons, anything like that, it's all food grade plastic. So chop it like that, butter container. As long as you can't see it, obviously it's not going to be that much of a detriment. But if you didn't want to use that much of the nutrient substrate, yeah, pop it in that, plant in that. The only downside is it's just like any potted plant. Eventually it will become pot bound. Especially Amazon swords are a little bit harder to split, but you just have to take it out and try not to spill any of the substrate. There's either that, if you wanted to get something that you didn't want to have too much of an expense with the planting substrate, have the power sand instead. It's a little bit cheaper, and that basically is a nutrient layer that goes on the bottom. And all you have to do is, once it gets to a point where it's used too much of it, root tabs, top it up with that. And they're basically tablets or capsules that you basically push into the substrate, and that push it around the plant, and it'll take that as nutrients.
How much are we talking for this?
So with these two, they're about 40 quid a bag. Don't get me wrong, you can get bags. The more premium brands are a lot more expensive. Like the ADA bags are very expensive for the substrate, but they are what they are. It's a premium product, and you're going to get a premium price with it. But it does work. Fluval's quite a budget-friendly one. You can even get the Awazi one, which is new out as well. You get a little bit more than these bags, and it's a little bit cheaper as well. So I'd definitely say choose your ones you go for, but it's a nice one to go for. And the Awazi one comes in 2 different colours as well, whereas the Fluval's only in 1. So you get the brown or black, as they call it, which is this one. They have one that is beige, which is more like this kind of sandy colour. So so that, then you've got, if I bring it over here, so this is the power sand. So this is the tropical one. So as you see, it's more like a sandy dirt substrate, and what you do is you just pop that straight on the bottom and then cap it over the top with gravel or sand, and that will stay at the bottom, as you see, just like that. And then you plant into your gravel, the roots have got something to feed off of them.
But again, have you got to empty the tank to do that?
Yes, it's the only downside to anything really with plants.
If we put it in a tub, we won't have to, would we? We could just sink that down.
You could sink it down, yeah, if you wanted to do it that way.
For
I know.
now, rather than
Yeah.
not going to be bothered stripping all the tanks. I'm not doing it. I mean, I will be moving it at some point.
Yeah. It's either that, if you wanted a quick fix, just stock it solely with epiphyte plants, so Java fern, Anubias, Boos, Hygrophila pinnafinata, that's all fine. they are the best plants to go for. So they just take nutrients through liquids fertiliser. So you could dose your tank with liquid fertiliser and have those plants looking flourishing.
So you recommend taking that sword out?
You can leave it in there, but yeah, by the looks of it, it does look like it's starting to die off anyway. So yeah, you could either take it out now or just let it do its thing. It's up to you. But yeah, I just stock it solely with like Java Fern and Anubias.
Well, that Anubis that I've got in there looks right now. It's had its day, so
Well, it just needs trimming. Plants, when they say they'll never have the day because they'll just keep on growing. But if they get to a point where they're looking a bit leggy, just trim it. It'll end up pushing out more leaves that way. Same with like if you like the swords, Java Fern's a good one to go for in a sense because they get really big long leaves, but they grow onto things, so they might be a little bit better for you. No problem.
The balls?
Moss balls.
Moss balls.
They are actually a type of algae, so they're just happy to grow on wherever. They take nutrients from the water column, so you find to use whatever with them.
Brilliant. Thank you.
No problem. Any more questions? Just don't feel free to shout them out. Okay, so we'll get this Pogostemon stellatus finished off. It's looking quite.
Which are the ones that are easy to grow, that are fast growing? Is it these ones?
Any of the stem plants, yeah. So a lot of them are. I'd avoid the pink ones. So any red-coloured plants are the ones that are like going to be the harder to grow. Easiest way to gauge if a plant's going to be easy to grow is the darker green it is, the more chlorophyll is in the leaves, which makes it a lot easier. So it doesn't need much light.
Right.
The lighter you go, the more harder it's going to be.
I read somewhere about doing like the light on 4 hours on, 4 hours on, 4 hours on.
Just have a solid period of like eight hours. If you're getting algae from that, try 6. But you shouldn't need any less than that. But yeah, having on and off is just going to not work really. Some people do it, but I just go for it all on one. Cheers, thank you.
Take you on average to do it.
Depends on the size of the tank. I mean, judging by the camera, I've been going about 2.5 hours at the minute. So, but I did have a rough idea of what I was doing when I started, so it does always help.
What influenced you?
Imagination. Pretty much it. Easiest way is just trying to think like a story really to tell the tank. So I was trying to go for like more or less like a fallen log. I've been using this wood called Corbo root, which is really nice. It's got like deep indentations, obviously banked up on a rocky outcrop, and then it's just going to have plants growing around it. But yeah, no real influence really. It's just trying to figure out what looks the best with the equipment you've got. Best thing I say with like hardscape is if you can store it if you've got like a garage or anything where you can just have a box full of it, inside your house, cupboard, anything like that, just pop, every time you come down, buy one piece. So whether it be a rock or a piece of wood, one piece every time, anywhere you go. And yeah, basically, yeah, and eventually over time you'll end up with a really good collection of hardscape that you get to a point where you don't need to buy anything anymore because you've got it. And then that way you can, if you're rescaping a tank, you've got lots of different options to go for. I mean, I'm lucky in a sense I've got 6 boxes of rocks to choose from. I've used about 1 box worth of rocks in this so far. Not going to put any more in there, but you can. But yeah, it's definitely helpful if you can store it. Slate cave, yeah.
Quite a bit of slate and built me old cave and
Yeah.
life plant from that. Yeah, nice.
Best way to do it, just keep building it up.
Yeah, so you can do it. Maybe good to chat to you.
Yeah, you too.
How big do they go?
What plant is that? The Billy Cardinalis. It's one of the more smaller growing. It is quite slow growing, but again, most things are in low energy setups. They are quite slow growing. If you want something quick growing, the best one I go for is the Limnophila, which is that plant down at the front next to the pink one. The one at the front, yep. It's like a feathery looking plant. That one's the quickest growing plant there is, really, in terms of stem plant. It'll get big and tall. In yes, always take it out of the pot. So the reason they're in pots is just for the stores to sell them. And they cover it in this content, which, as you can see, I'm taking loads of it off for all the plants that I've used. So this stuff here is called rock wool, and basically what they do is so they can pack it all together in the pot to ship, but they pipe it full of nutrients for the plant to survive whilst it's in that tank. Downside to it being in your tank at home is it releases into the water column, which can start making algae grow on the plant leaves and on the glass because it's really high nutrients that are in it, and you don't want that to leak into your tank really. Not only that, it's like a pot, you know, if you buy a pot of plants in the garden or anything like that, they do become pot bound eventually, where they're either going to need to be taken out, hacked back a bit and then replanted, or repotted into a large pot.
What are these called?
So this is Hygrophila rosea australis. It's a really easy growing one, yeah. It's really nice variegation in the leaf on the top, and that can also go pink if it gets towards the light. So they're a light depending plant where they'll change colour, which is quite nice. Possibly. I'll have a look for you.
So what do I need to do with that then?
So
Out like it's just done.
you just take it out, yeah.
And then you just do them individually.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you.
How am I going to attach it to anything?
So with that, it's not an epiphyte plant, that one. So you just want to plant it in your substrate. So obviously if you haven't got any planting substrate in there, it's just going to need liquid fertiliser.
What? I guess what I'm buying and put like shot glasses. Shot glasses. Put some of them in.
Yeah.
That's not that daft, though, is it really? Or is that a daft idea? We could get some of that, stuff or whatever. Put that in like a little like plastic or something online. Put bits of plastic.
It's still like keeping it now, though, isn't it? Not to be able to spread.
Yeah, if you want something a little bit bigger, I'd say milk cartons are the best.
Yeah.
Just chop it really shallow at the bottom, but that'll give you enough that at least you'll be able to grow a little bit better.
Or even like a lemonade bottle.
Yeah, anything like that. Yeah.
You know, so it's that kind of
So
size.
anything that's fine for us. It's all food grade. So if it's food grade plastic, it's fine to go in the aquarium, just because it's not going to harm the fish because it can't harm us. So it'll be fine. I've used it before in previous setups.
What, just put like
It needs to be deep, does it? 5 centimetres.
5 centimetres, yeah, it's 2 inch. It's next to nothing.
What, you just put sand up to it?
Yeah.
Sand up to it, or if you want to bury it completely, just
And then put a fan
pop it
layer
over the
so
top so you can't see it. Yeah. That'll get some rocks and put it round it so you can't see it, and then bank your sand up. There's ways of doing it. Hello, you're right there. Thank you. If you got any questions, feel free to shout them out. Okay.
I want to put global stratum out like that.
Okay.
And I put it in mesh bags.
You want to put it in mesh bags instead? Okay.
That's what I do. I put
That's
it in
what you
mesh
do, okay.
bags and then put the substrate on top where the roots go down and grab it. And if you ever redesign it, you've still got the mesh.
It's very true. You could always use a gravel scoop. I mean, I personally don't like doing it in the mesh bags just because I'd rather have it just loose so I can plant deep into it. But I know some people do it. It's fine if you do. It works both ways, whichever works for you.
So they're nice when you turn them.
So I'm trying to think, did we deliver your 6-foot aquarium?
Pardon? Yeah, you did
We didn't wake you up, did we?
No.
They ordered extra for me, but I haven't nicked them all.
As long as mine's still there.
Is there anything in particular you're looking for? Yep.
Is it that one you choose?
That's the same one, yeah, it's just a smaller packet.
Yeah, just
So it is.
that, in that, covered with a bit. I'll show you a picture of the tank.
Okay.
Let's find this one. There we go. Hydrophilia.
Agrophilia. Any particular species?
Platyphilia.
Okay.
Not what I've come for.
Oh, well, that's lovely. There you go, really nice plant growth in there.
I've done it on DIY lights.
Yeah, yeah.
Just LED
Spotlights.
floodlights.
Yeah, yeah.
30 watt each. The cheaper way of doing it.
Works just as well. It's just the power of the light. That's all you need.
Yeah, well I've got on the original tank with a 4-foot lead, so the light for that is not quite long enough.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 of them. So I thought I've got 2 of them. It's still got up range. I can't afford the blue hole 2.0, 3.0.
3.0 ones, yeah. The plant lights, they are more premium price, but they're good. Especially if you want to get like more reds out your plants, they're definitely good.
I've got quite a few red points in there. I've got Vallis.
Yeah, the Vallis, yeah, yeah.
I bought some Vallis out and there were one piece of red one in there.
Yeah.
The red one, ruby was falling out. That one's a tough one. The rest
Yeah,
of it
yeah.
is just barely growing.
It's just strange for Vallis, because Vallis usually is quite a rampant growing, yeah.
It's alright, it's alright. Just put the one.
Yeah, we're getting there. Just a few more plants to go. Might have to put a few more Java ferns on it, but we're getting there. Got a few more just to stick at the back as well, down that back area. But
Yeah, I got one of those big trunk things, hollow, and
Yeah.
took a circle or so to it, cut it in half, create 2 big curves.
yeah, it's a nice one callback route. So it's a really nice one. But we're getting there. A few more plants. They'll hopefully not tell me off for wasting off too many, but
Yeah, main fishing tank is cribs.
nice. They're breeding well then.
Really?
Can't stop them.
The original two that I bought got a cave in that corner, and their babies have all grown up, and they've got a cave in the middle and a cave on this end, and they're all fighting against each other. I brought a load in a few weeks, like,
Yeah,
got a big population now.
you have to at some point. Definitely.
I can't believe how quick the break all that.
Oh, it's now tomorrow. Yeah, once they get started, it's stopping them.
What we're doing next week then?
We're probably going to do a few more stem plants down the back, if I can find some nice ones. And then I've just got a few gaps that I've noticed down the front here. I'm going to stick some Anubiases in or some more crypts. And then
This time on Lily that you chuck down here.
oh, that down there, yeah, so that'll
Cool.
come up really nicely up here.
Yeah.
Fill that area out really nicely because it's quite quick growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up there we're in there, just plug that plants down, and all of a sudden all babies start shooting up. Oh, right.
They're nice. Have you ever got any of the red tiger lotus in there?
I've got some.
Yeah, they're nice
One
ones.
of them, the original one is on that side of the tank. It's only got like a couple of leaves, it's barely growing. The one on this side is a cutting off of that one.
That's
That
doing better.
one's sort of massive, and it's got lily pads and surface.
Oh, nice. Have you got? You ever tried this one? So this is a banana leaf. Yeah.
Got them in a week that we're in.
They've got some in at the moment, yeah, but they're a nice one to grow. Got something a little bit more unusual.
A friend of mine who's got a crypt plant.
Yeah.
I don't know what species it is, but this tank is probably about 18 inches tall. And it's just subsealing the tank.
It's probably the same one I've got here.
Cheap LED lights.
So it's Crypt Balance is the one you can get.
Yeah,
It-
years ago in like, what they, you know, with fumble stratum like that. Well, fumble stratum is too expensive to just willy-nilly chuck around. I've done that. Been here.
Yeah. I just reuse it.
Yeah, I do that. I didn't want to. For years I've kept this, done like rice, and done it exact same way. And then I thought, I'm trying to redo it. It's all mixed together with grit and sand and whatever else. Let's start using mesh
So
plates.
sometimes you use it as a base layer, then you put this fresh stuff on top. It's still good to use, but majority of the time I end up just chucking it.
Yeah, well, when you've got time when you're delivering the art, set it all up and whatnot, and then filter like external.
Oh, I know.
Ended up getting an FX1.
Best way. Yeah, they're a good one. Yeah, and it certainly comes with a Fluval 407, so hopefully it'll be powerful enough. But if not, we'll have to chuck some surface skimmers in.
Fine. I took the surface skimmers out. Not surface skimmers, sorry. The wave maker.
Yeah.
Right in the 4-foot tank, but the old pump, which is right on the floor.
Yeah.
It's piped up on the bigger tank. And I thought, oh, I don't really need it. And I
Oh,
put
wow.
the FX4 on it, it's like straight to the end of the tank.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Oh, that's looking nice. Crimson love those.
I'm not sure what they're deciding to put in it. Probably going to put some dwarf cichlids in. I don't know. But yeah, they probably would love it. I mean, some rams would look really nice in here, or some epistogrammas. But
Get a bit of Monte Carlo, start gluing it on the tops of rocks.
yeah, it's nice when you do it that way.
That's good.
It's lovely. So I always like. You've used tripartita before. Hydrocotyl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hydrocarbon mountain.
Yeah. So that's my favourite one for growing like
Oh yeah.
on top of stuff.
When I had the 4-foot tank, I had the Blackbird style sponge.
Yeah.
We were running external filters, but I had it all coming through with a big sponge. And I planted that plant on the top of the sponge, so it grows really
Yeah.
quick out of water. Then
Yeah, it does.
we'll get some.
Just wait till this ladies and gents are out of the way of the plant tank and I'll go and grab some more.
That was the old 4-foot tank
That's nice, yeah, you got your Monte Carlo
on a rock.
on a rock.
Big piece of jagger stone.
Nice.
But it's all raised up. And it was sat on one of these stumps. It's completely hollow, so like fish could actually swim through it.
Did you glue it on, or did you just wedge it in?
I glued it on, but it didn't take.
Yeah.
So I just wrapped it in twine.
Best way with Monte Carlo. Yeah, I always wrap it
It grew and just,
or wedge it.
so just by seeing top of tank. Look how they put up.
Yeah, is that what you trimmed off, or is it just
Floating away.
floating away? Oh wow. Just give it a quick spray. It's the best way. We always like to talk about fish here.
We've got 3 tanks. Big tropical tank. A smaller goldfish tank. That's quite a big eye, but they pull up one stuff they don't away. And then the kitchen is a little shrimp tank.
Nice.
That's really like mine. Because it's in kitchen, it seems to get a lot more salt or a lot more light. So there's algae growing on glass, so I don't have to ever feed.
Yeah. There we go.
What do you smell that?
Let's get some more plants. Let's have a look at what we're going to do.
Yeah, a couple of a week and he said he'd got something like plants.
Background plants.
No, the hydrophilia that I come for today, I came for it last week and he hadn't got it right. He says he's got one more plant in play.
Okay, yeah, if you give him a shout, he'll probably tell you what he's got wrapped up.
Banana for floating around.
Catching. Now back with more plants. And we were going for 3 hours. Time flies. Okay. There we go. So these ones are Cryptocarine Petchii. Really nice small crypt, which I think will look quite nice underneath the piece of bogwood. Got 2 of those. I might split this big one. We'll see. this somewhere else. Get it under there. Should might be easier wedging it in than my finger. Just like that. Nice. Possibly. I'll stick a big rock on top of it. Don't you worry, it's not going anywhere. Oh, sorry, don't trip, sir. How long is that thing? Right, there we go. Sorry, I didn't realise I just pulled my mic out. I don't know how long that's been out for. So the plant we're using next is a Nubius Nana Mini. It's not quite bonsai, but it's just a little bit smaller than the Nana. Again, if I've pulled my mic out before, a long time before this, I'll go over in voiceover and tell you exactly what I'm doing.
Is that alright? I won't be sure. If you want to know which plant to help best get rid of algae in the bottom.
Right, any plants.
That's flirty algae.
Got air algae.
Is it air algae?
We've got a really nice Nubius heterophilia. It's one of the more larger species, but I'm thinking down at the bottom
Right.
it'll look quite nice as it grows out of the rocks.
Right. So, and will that have an impact on nitrate?
Plants will lower it.
The plants will lower nitrate because it just keeps going a little bit over at pH. Keeps being a little bit off.
Plants will lower nitrate.
Right. So plants will NS first.
There we go, that looks a lot better, doesn't it?
Right, thank you for your time.
Not a problem. Thank you. Take care. The next one we're going to do is a combination of Rotala rotundifolia and rotundifolia orange juice. And the reason I'm going to do a mix is because it'll come up nice with the colours when mixed together, so you have this sort of like mix of pink and orange, which will look really nice. It's a really easy growing plant, and like I said before, it is a light dependent plant as well, so as it gets closer to light is when it changes colour, or if you get more high intense lighting on it. look quite nice, hopefully.
You ready CO2 or not?
Yeah, no, this is going to be a low energy setup, this one. So, just because it's a little bit easy for the guys because they don't really know that much on CO2 setups.
I've done DIY CO2.
Yeah, DIY CO2 works. It all depends on what you wanted to get from a setup. You don't necessarily need it, but if you
Little maintenance as possible.
it's whatever works for you. I always find doing more regular water changes works for me.
Oh, I keep
So,
all that. Keep doing all that more. At the minute, I can't find the balance.
Can't find the balance between what?
Between me, I'm liking it.
Okay.
I was trying harder and harder to take stuff away and complain about it,
Yeah.
It's fun to grow it.
You just finding maybe like escape or not.
I know it's going to happen. I know I'm going to end up with it.
It's always the case. Most I'll ever run mine's usually about a year, and then I re-escape. Just because it's easy for me as a content creator, but it allows me to play around more as well.
Yeah.
So multiple tanks helps. So you can.
Well, it doesn't help, but we've just moved and I ain't got much to play about.
Yeah.
I left a lot of it and bring it.
Yeah.
I'll buy all nil and then I lost my job, didn't I? So I'm too bad.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of drift. It's just not big enough. Not
Yeah.
big pieces.
You need little pieces. You can always silicone them together and make a big piece.
I could do.
Got to play around with it and stack it up a bit. Right, I'll get these plants in.
You know those containers? Are they
Yep.
watertight or not?
I'd imagine they are, but I don't have a clue in more honesty.
They bolted there into the like it's sealed.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a clue. Maybe you just wanted to put plant in it or something.
No, you've got fish like babies, and I've got some out, and they're in a washing up bowl at the minute.
Okay.
But obviously that's not going to be suitable for any length of time because it can be knocked over and stuff. So I'm just looking for something that I can put them in.
If you have to have a cheap tank, the best one probably goes to the Aquatropic 25 that's on the counter. So
Okay.
on the counter, there's a tank on there. It's called the Aqua 25, I believe it is. It's a 25 litre tank. It's $49.99. Comes with a filter and everything.
I'm not spending any money on these little things because off at time. they don't make it and they get eaten anyway. So these ones are lucky I got them out, only because I took a plant out that is like a lily that I was like, not very keen on that. Took it out, put it in a bowl for just in case there's anything I can rescue creature-wise off it. And a load of baby fish come out like days later. Just
Okay.
as I was thinking, I'll throw that away, I was like, oh no, they've all hatched, so I'm like, I don't want to.
I mean, you could always get a breeding net, put them in your main tank.
No, because it's outside the pond.
It's outside pond. If it's got full of plants, then just leave them be. There'll probably ones in there that are surviving.
They'll get too tiny, like. That's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Trouble is, if they haven't got any filtration or oxygen, they're not going to last that long anyway. So, if you don't want to spend any money, just chuck them back in. Let nature take its course. It's the best way.
I think.
Yeah. It's better than all you're doing when you put them in a box with no filtration. There's going to be a limited period of time. Yeah. If you've got plants in the ponds, they'll just put them around there. They'll find a space where they can survive.
I was going to try and,
a couple.
keep them until they got a bit bigger, and then put them in so they're not mouth size.
A couple might get eaten, but at the end of the day, if they're just goldfish fry or something like that, it's from the pond. Are they goldfish fry or koi?
Yeah, goldfish.
Yeah.
Mixed sizes, so they've all bred.
They'll just keep breeding every year. So, some will get picked off, some will survive.
3 times already
Yeah.
this year.
They can do, yeah. As soon as it gets a bit warm there, they'll start spawning.
The thing is, they're going to get sucked through filter anyway, most of them. They'll just be a bit bad.
You'd be surprised if they where plants are, they'll not get sucked through any filters or anything like that.
Okay. That's never a real. Oh, never mind. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Have a word with someone because we've got at least 3 sturgeon in there that have gone belly up and not in a good way.
It's probably because of the heat ramps. They're usually wanting more food, but
I don't know.
if they are,
Stomach's so swollen and everything.
if you ask one of the lads to call them over, they'll have a look.
Told him that it looked like it was, but what, I've only been in 10 minutes at the only one now, it's 3.
Right, okay,
Thank you.
no problem. I'll go one last spray down.
Alright, Paul. What was that crypt that we told you?
Balance. Yeah, that's the crypt. Grows about 2 foot tall. I know there was some bang in the middle. No. Balance. It's like in the middle of the tank, but sort of in the middle of the rows as well. I'll come and show you. It's that one there.
Oh, long narrow.
Yep.
Thanks again for your talk.
No problem, thank you.
Appreciate your advice.
There we go. So what I'm going to do now is just put some rocks in place to hopefully stop any floating of the wood just while it sinks. As I say, Corbo root is notorious for floating. Anything heavy in there will just help weigh it down a bit. I realise it makes this lovely planted aquarium look a bit ugly now, but the rocks can be taken out afterwards, so it just helps lock them into place in a more natural way. Go. I think we're done. So anyway, thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Big thank you to Maidenhead Aquatics at Sheffield, and hope you enjoy the scape. I'll get a few close-up shots once it's all full of water, and I hope you all come down to the store and take a look at it once it's grown in.